Chapter 101. The moment Xiang would turn around, Guanshan used the secret behind the door. His current position was, of course, 100% determined to be behind the door. After the item took effect, others would not be able to observe him in any way. In fact, when Xiang entered the door, Guanshan had already used this item once. Otherwise, Xiang would have discovered him when he closed the door. When Su Rong saw this scene, his reaction was naturally extremely shocked and even fearful. However, in Xiangwen's eyes, these emotions were probably caused by him, so he did not care. The use of this item was actually an experiment. During this period of time, Guanshan had been thinking that he might have some misunderstandings about the simulator. The items that he obtained were actually additional items obtained from the virtual scene. Every time the simulator calculated, it would also say that all rewards can be kept. This meant that some items that could be used from the virtual simulation were kept. The energy to materialize these virtual items came from the number of monsters that he killed each time. Therefore, when he did not kill all the monsters, the simulator could not keep all the items. Guanshan felt that his logic was clear, and he suspected that since these items were materialized from the virtual world, they could actually affect reality. Therefore, he tried it. Anyway, if he was discovered, he would just knock him out. There was no risk at all in these two plans. Now, it seemed that Guanshan's guess was indeed correct. The secret behind the door took effect, and for 3 minutes, no one would be able to observe his existence. Therefore, at this moment, Xiangwen was only surprised for a moment. He turned around again, thinking that Su Rong was trying to create a diversion to create an opportunity for him to escape. He shook his head and reached out to grab Su Rong's hair. He sneered and said, "You don't think that this little trick will work, do you?" Xiangwen reached out and patted the medicine box next to him. This medicine, other than giving you a strong self-healing ability, has some small side effects, such as softening your muscles and slowing your reaction. Originally, I tried my best to get rid of these side effects, but now it saved me a lot of trouble. As soon as he let go, Su Rong directly fell onto the bed. The place where the needle was inserted directly hit the bedboard. In an instant, his face twisted in pain. However, because he was restrained, he could not curl up at all. He was in extreme pain. Xiangwen looked down at him and said, "If you still don't listen, then you can have a taste of incontinence of a paralyzed patient." He revealed an evil smile. "Don't worry, I'll tell your parents that this is an act specially to make you can stay in the Sacred Heart. Your parents will definitely have a whole new level of respect for you." Xiangwen laughed a few times in a low voice. Then, he waited by the side for a long time, pinching Su Rong's body from time to time. Guanshan also watched for about half an hour. He's really patient. If he repeats this for 3 hours every day, what happened next was somewhat unbearable to watch. In order to test the effect of the medicine, Xiangwen cut different parts of Su Rong's body, waited for the time it took to heal, and recorded it. Each part had to be repeated about 3 times to ensure the accuracy of the data. Guanshan could roughly understand why Su Rong's eyes were lifeless when he was taken out for a walk last time. If he was treated like this every day, even if he was not mentally ill, he would become mentally ill. 3 hours later, Xiangwen cleaned up everything and left with the medicine box. No one knew that his medicine box was filled with blood-soaked gauze and even some pieces of flesh. As for Xiangwen, he could even calmly greet the nurses passing by with a smile. In the ward, Su Rong, who looked normal on the outside, was still trapped in the restraints. The layers of restraints covered all the scars on his body that had not completely healed. By the time the nurse came, these scars would have completely disappeared. So that's how it is. According to the information, there was a bruise on Su Rong's body. It's probably because Xiangwen didn't grasp the effects of the medicine properly and allowed the nurse to discover the marks on his body. Later, he had to modify the medical records. Guanshan thought as he silently walked out from behind the door. The effect of the secret behind the door automatically disappeared. Su Rong's eyes turned and looked at him. There was no fluctuation in his eyes at all. He perfectly acted out what it meant to have nothing to live for. Guanshan walked over and reached out to help him untie the restraints around his mouth. Su Rong coughed twice and took a few deep breaths. He did not know how long it had been, but he finally felt a trace of freedom. In an instant, tears even welled up in his eyes. He looked at Guanshan in a daze and said in a hoarse voice, "You are the Grim Reaper? Can I finally be free?" He saw Guanshan repeatedly disappear and reappear with his own eyes. In the extreme pain, he could only think of one possibility, and that was that the Grim Reaper had finally come for him. Judging from his tone, it was even full of anticipation. "Unfortunately, I'm not." Guanshan sighed and said, "I'm just a reporter who came to find the truth." Su Rong was stunned. A reporter? What kind of reporter could suddenly disappear? Also, he saw with his own eyes that this person directly broke the steel burglar window with his bare hands. He said in confusion, "Then what are you doing here?" "I have already recorded what Xiangwen said, just now." Guanshan shook the recording pen in his hand. "Now you can tell me everything you know. I will help you find evidence to prove that you are not mentally ill, and then send Xiangwen to prison." Su Rong heard this, gritted his teeth, and said in a low voice, "He is a lunatic, a real lunatic." Su Rong cursed and told him what happened after he came in. It turned out that he did want to pretend to be mentally ill to escape the punishment of murder. His parents somehow contacted Xiangwen, who said that he could let Su Rong stay safely in the Sacred Cur Hospital, but who knew that this was the beginning of the nightmare. Su Rong followed Xiangwen's instructions and pretended to be a patient. But gradually, other doctors in the hospital thought that he was not ill. In fear, Su Rong followed Xiangwen step by step and turned himself into a severely mentally ill patient. According to Su Rong's knowledge, besides him, at least 7 other people had been killed. During this process, Xiangwen began to give him medicine, and the effect of the medicine was just like what Guanshan had seen and heard. Guanshan asked again, "Do you know what the basement he mentioned is?" Su Rong nodded and shivered. "Among the 7 people, you can see that 3 of them are hospitalized in the hospital's files, but you can't find them in the hospital anymore. Those people are patients who have been abandoned by their families. No one has come to visit them for more than 3 years, and they have only paid the hospitalization fees. And these people are the most convenient targets for Xiangwen." Su Rong's eyes were full of fear, and he said in a low voice, "At the end of the corridor in the 4th building, there's an entrance to the basement in the utility room. Those patients who became unrecognizable because of the failure of his medicine experiment are being raised by him like livestock." PS1. Thank you to Doll28 and Mo Yin Alone, Hold the Dog Manager, Raven10432 for your tips. PS2. Staring at the bowl. Chapter 102. Raise them like livestock. Guanshan frowned as he listened. Xiangwen simply treated the hospital as his lab rat farm. Those patients that no one cared about were his best experimental material. When there was no material, he would even create material for himself. He seemed to be very skilled in turning normal people into mentally ill people. Not only did he contact the victims himself, but he also sent them by others, such as Jiang Xian. With so many patients, it's definitely not possible to accumulate them in a short period of time. Didn't anyone find out? Guanshan's heart sank. Or the people who found out have had their memories wiped. Since Xiangwen could come up with a drug that could greatly enhance people's self-healing ability, it did not seem difficult to wipe people's memories. In particular, Xiangwen's position was the deputy director of the Sacred Cur Hospital. If he wanted to drug the water or food provided by the Sacred Cur Hospital, it would be a very simple matter. As for those patients who had become mentally ill or were mentally ill in the first place, no one would believe what they said. Good Lord, he's covering the sky with one hand. Guanshan shook his head and felt what magical realism was. The person who could invent such a drug must have great medical attainments, not to mention that Xiangwen was a professional psychiatrist, not a pharmacist. Obviously, he had such a strong ability, but he had to use such a disgusting method. He must be a real lunatic. Guanshan asked about the identity of the few patients, but Su Rong had been in prison for a long time, so he did not know much. He could only say the names of 2 patients who were being tortured like him. This was also when he went out to get some fresh air. Xiangwen told him the information of some of the patients he passed by to show off and intimidate him to show his control. Xiang Wen often intimidated Su Rong. If Su Rong hadn't almost succeeded in resisting once, causing Xiang Wen to take him to the basement for a tour and use that as an excuse to intimidate him, Su Rong would have died. He did not know that there was a scene more terrifying than hell in this world. When Su Rong described the scene in the basement to Guan Shan, his whole body was trembling. It showed how big the psychological trauma was. Okay, I think I understand, but I have to go now, or I'll be discovered by the nurse. Guan Shan saw that it was almost time, so he quickly asked the last question. Xiang Wen is not acting alone? Su Rong nodded. There are other nurses and doctors helping him, but these people are only responsible for checking and recording. They leave after a while, so I don't know their names. Guan Shan nodded and said, Next time, I'll bring the name list and photos of the medical staff on this floor. You can identify them. At this time, there were footsteps outside the ward. Guan Shan restored the restraints on Su Rong's body to its original state, and then opened the anti-theft window again. He avoided the patrolling security guard's light from the bottom of the wall and returned to his room safely. The next day, Guan Shan ushered in his own ward round as usual. Lu Qiuqiu asked a few questions as before, and then looked at Guan Shan, who was calm and frowned. It had been almost 2 weeks, and Guan Shan behaved like an ordinary person. Why did she feel that she had misjudged before? This person was really as innocent as he said. He was just here to investigate. But her feeling at that time could not be wrong. Guan Shan suddenly asked, Do you have the list of the medical staff on that floor? With photos. Lu Qiuqiu was stunned and whispered, Is there any progress? Guan Shan nodded. Significant progress, but more evidence is needed. The recording in his hand was too incredible, and Su Rong was now a mental patient, so his testimony was basically invalid. Most importantly, because of the special nature of Xiang Wen's drug, Su Rong's wounds would heal quickly, leaving no evidence to prove that he was really abused. This might be one of the reasons why Xiang Wen was so fearless. Therefore, the breakthrough lay in the other medical staff and the patients in the basement. Lu Qiuqiu thought for a while and said, I'll give you a duty list. You can find the corresponding photos on the official website. Okay, Guan Shan said again. By the way, who is usually in charge of the utility room in the 4th building? Lu Qiuqiu was stunned and shook her head. No one is in charge. That place seems to have always been used to store old equipment. I don't even know where the key is. Usually, no one uses it. Oh, it seemed that he could only use force. In this case, he only had one chance. He had to wait until he got the other evidence before going to the basement. Otherwise, if he failed, it would arouse Xiang Wen's vigilance and even make him suspicious, and it would be difficult to save him later. But if he was suspicious, then so be it. Anyway, Xiang Wen probably wouldn't suspect his own target. Guan Shan calculated his actions and decided to go to Su Rong's ward again at night. At noon, Lu Qiuqiu took the duty list and secretly gave it to Guan Shan. Guan Shan was surprised to see Lu Duk's name on it, and it happened to be close to Su Rong's psychological treatment. Could it be that the nurse in charge of me now is actually Xiang Wen's spy? Guan Shan looked at the list silently and felt that it was reasonable. Xiang Wen knew about Guan Shan's situation so quickly. If it was through Lu Duk, then it was easy to understand. But why? From the contact during this time, Lu Duk didn't seem like someone who would help the evildoer. She was very considerate and was a very good nurse. However, if even Lu Duk was like that, how many of the medical staff were actually Xiang Wen's eyes and ears? I have to be more careful. Guan Shan was afraid that he would alert the enemy. Xiang Wen was a real local. If he wanted to hide these things, all traces would disappear in less than a day. By then, Guan Shan wouldn't be able to find a place to investigate. At night, Guan Shan went to Su Rong's ward again and asked him to identify the medical staff. Sure enough, Lu Duk was among them. Guan Shan had a rough idea of these people. Not long after he returned to his ward, he suddenly noticed that there was movement in the room next door. Next door, that was Jiang Xian's ward. It seems that this is the first needle that Xiang Wen mentioned. Guan Shan was amazed. He felt that Jiang Xian was really unlucky. Not only did he meet a ghost, but he was also tricked by a master. Now, he was targeted by this pervert. He got up from the bed and quietly sneaked to the window next door. This guy is still too old. If it weren't for the fact that there were no other patients, I wouldn't waste so much effort on this kind of trash. Xiangwen's voice was faint as he muttered to himself. Guanshan leaned against the wall and was about to record when he heard a second person's voice. Stop, there's someone else. Guanshan was shocked. Was he discovered? PS1. Thank you equals octopus equals Deoju equals Shu Lingue you for the tip. PS2 Bowl ZZZ. Chapter 103. Xiangwen was about to inject the drug into Jiang Xian, who didn't notice anything. But when he heard the voice, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at another figure that slowly appeared in the corner of the room. It was really a human figure, like a cloud of black fog, an object separated from the shadow on the ground and turned into a vague human figure. It was this human figure that spoke. You continue, I'll go and catch the little mouse that came to me. Xiangwen nodded and showed an excited smile. I was just worried that I didn't have the materials, but I didn't expect that someone would come to me on their own. The human figure said lightly, the more, the better, isn't it? The sooner you complete the active drug, the sooner you can get the benefits. At that time, you don't have to stay in this small hospital anymore. Your talent should be able to play a role in a broader place. Xiangwen's eyes were filled with greed and ambition. That's right. I should be a VIP of those rich people and not be on tenterhooks here, feigning civility with those fools every day. The human figure smiled and said, yes, soon, both of us. His voice gradually faded, and the black fog-like figure gradually merged into the darkness again. Xiangwen's eyes flashed. He took out the syringe again, hummed a song, and injected it into Jiang Xian's arm. He was not worried that the black shadow, or, to be precise, the person should be called the silhouette being. About 4 years ago, the silhouette being came to the door, claiming that he had observed Xiangwen for a long time and thought that he was worth cooperating with. Then he showed his power to Xiangwen like a devil. In front of Xiangwen, he turned into a python-like black fog and easily threw Xiangwen's boss, who Xiangwen hated for a long time, directly off the 5th floor and turned him into a vegetable. Xiangwen also took this opportunity to rise up the ranks and naturally became the department director. This laid a solid foundation for him to become the deputy director later on. According to the silhouette being, Xiangwen and he were the same kind of people. Both of them were paranormals. The silhouette being was a physical mutation type, and Xiangwen was a very rare enhancement type. But until now, they had not come into contact with other superhumans. As for what kind of cooperation, it was the so-called active potion in their hands. With the raw materials and formulas brought by the silhouette being, coupled with Xiangwen's intelligence and technology, this magical potion was soon produced. As for how to confirm the effect of the potion, now they had the answer. Now, the stability of the potion had a greater guarantee. The fact that Su Rong hadn't had the same accident as before was the best proof. The power of the silhouette being had turned those who tried to enter this place to investigate into their patients countless times. That old man Ganshun, what kind of crooked melons and dates did he bring me? After the injection, Xiangwen looked at Jiang Xian on the bed and couldn't help but curl his lips. At this stage, it was naturally best to test the limits of the active potion. Otherwise, it would be difficult to test the limits of the active potion. A young man in his 20s like Su Rong could withstand repeated cutting of his limbs, so it was more convenient for him to observe. But Jiang Xian's age was already considered to be stuck at the edge of the active potion. After using it a few times, it would be directly scrapped. If it weren't for that old man's promise to split the profits 30 to 70, Xiangwen pinched Jiang Xian's arm muscles and felt that they were obviously loose, revealing a trace of disgust. Ganshun, the so-called master invited by the Jiang family. In Xiangwen's view, he was just a swindler who had some tricks up his sleeve. It was just that his swindling skills were really good, and he almost tricked them. However, this old man was very useful. Through him, they could get those possessed people to the Sacred Hospital and provide them with a lot of materials. Xiangwen curled up the corners of his mouth and said, "This time, I think it's another new material, right?" the silhouette being turned into a black mist and walked through the shadows. He snorted coldly, staring at the back of the person who was constantly running away in front of him, and sneered, "You overestimate yourself. A mere D-class paranormal. How dare you come here? Do you really think you can hide perfectly?" The silhouette being's ability was to turn himself into a shadow and integrate with the darkness. Moreover, within a certain range of the shadow, he could perceive everything that happened. Although he was limited by his ability and couldn't clearly perceive the whole picture, he still knew clearly whether someone was coming or not. When the paranormal came over, the silhouette being had already noticed something strange. Because this guy's ability was like a chameleon, adjusting the color of himself and the environment to the same color. Although normal people could see him, the shadows could see everything. Swish! The silhouette being spread his wings like an eagle, gliding at high speed in the shadows of the corridor, and immediately caught up with the poor paranormal. The paranormal's eyes were filled with horror. The giant python transformed by the silhouette being wrapped tighter and tighter until he finally fainted from suffocation. The silhouette being released the paranormal, turned into his human form, and injected a muscle relaxant into the paranormal's body. A paranormal with a fleshly body was a good material. Okay, there's still one more little mouse. The silhouette being sneered and wanted to go back to catch the other paranormal that he sensed, but he suddenly found that he couldn't sense it anymore. How come there is no one? The silhouette being threw the paranormal into the room in shock and ordered Xiang to lock him up. Then he angrily walked around the room again and again, but he couldn't find any trace of the paranormal at all. He ran away. The silhouette being gritted his teeth. I don't believe that he can disappear on the spot. Taking advantage of the night, he expanded the search range to the entire Sacred Cur hospital. When Guanshan heard the second sound, he immediately activated gravity manipulation and took a step back at the fastest speed. He landed on the manhole cover at the edge of the flower bed. Then he activated the secret behind the door and instantly hid himself. There must be a front and back door, which meant that this door must be a channel and it must have a physical body. So a manhole cover that perfectly met these requirements, as the door of the sewer, of course, was also a door, but it was really difficult to define the front and back of the sewer. So standing on the sewer was also behind the door. So Guanshan stayed on the manhole cover silently for 3 minutes, then returned to his room and waited until the next day. Although he didn't record the scene of Jiang Xian being killed, Guanshan got more important information. It turns out that Xiang, when has a helper, Guanshan didn't see the helper's face during the whole process, but at least he knew that the helper's strength was estimated to be a bit high. So he directly caught another person who was trying to investigate the truth. That man should be locked up in the basement now. I don't know how he's doing, but the evidence now is just barely enough. Should I go to the 4th building to take a look? Guanshan was thinking about whether to wait for Xiang to make a move on him and catch him red-handed, or to go to the basement to save the unfortunate man of justice who was unfortunately caught. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. He looked up and saw Jiang Xian walking in with a broken face. He said excitedly, I saw a ghost again. Guanshan, believe me. It came again last night. I saw it, but I can't move. Jiang Xian looked at Guanshan hopefully. You must have a way when you came in, right? As long as you can get me out, I'll get a promotion, a raise, anything. Save me. PS1. Thank you to God Slayer Byakuya and Phone Kong for the reward. PS2. Bull's type, sudden inspiration. Chapter 104. So he was still conscious last night? Did he just think that he was bettered in by a ghost? Guanshan was stunned for a moment, then understood after thinking about it. The ghost that Jiang Xian thought was probably because he had been knocked out by Xiang in the middle of the night, and then had been subjected to experiments or other tests. In a daze, he thought that Xiang was a ghost. But then again, Mr. Jiang, haven't you checked all the information? How come you don't know who the person you're looking for contacted? Guanshan pretended to be puzzled and asked. If he didn't know after checking, there could only be one reason, and that was that Jiang Xian didn't look at it carefully at all. After he found a detective, he asked him to investigate, and after he got his hands on the information, he used it directly. He didn't have any ideas of his own. Just like Guan Shan mocked at the time. Drinking tea in the office every day, you don't know anything else. Jiang Xian was speechless for a moment and then became angry out of humiliation. Then he remembered that he was the one asking for help. So he could only force a smile and say, "Didn't I forget? If you think it's not enough, as long as I can do it, just ask. I just want you to take me out of here." Jiang Xian had been struggling for almost a week. Since the day Guan Shan came in, he had been thinking about whether he should ask him for help. Although Guan Shan was his only acquaintance in the Sacred-Cœur hospital, they could be considered enemies. But in other words, although they could be considered enemies, Guan Shan was the only acquaintance he could ask for help. Even Jiang Xian's family didn't believe him and wanted to keep him in this terrible hospital. He really couldn't think of anyone else he could ask for help, but it wasn't easy for him to ask Guan Shan for help. This guy had previously mocked and ridiculed him in front of so many people, not giving him any face at all. If he were to beg Guan Shan now, wouldn't it be equivalent to slapping his own face and admitting that he was an idiot in disguise? Jiang Xian tried to open his mouth every time, but he couldn't convince himself. What really made him let go of these entanglements was another nightmarish experience last night. Jiang Xian said incoherently, "I really saw a ghost last night. I had to leave this place. If this continued, it would eat me. Do you know this feeling? I was lying there, unable to move. Those dark things surrounded me, and then I could clearly feel the pain of my arm being torn apart." He recalled the scene and couldn't help but become excited. They had sharp teeth and cold venom. I really felt it clearly. Their teeth pierced my skin bit by bit and injected venom. I wanted to struggle and resist, but my body didn't listen to me at all. I'm really like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. No, you were just injected with anesthetics and then woke up halfway. Guan Shan couldn't help but criticize in his heart. Jiang Xian covered his arm in horror. "When I woke up in the morning, for a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but," he sighed and said with a serious face, "I found a little blood stain on my arm. Those scenes I thought I saw in the dream were all real. No, you were actually just stabbed with a needle and injected with some unknown drug." "Well, that's already very scary." Jiang Xian's tone became even more terrified. "But I didn't find any wounds on my body. The pain is clearly still there, but I can't find any wounds at all. It must be eating my soul. No, it's just that the drugs made your healing speed faster." Although Guan Shan refuted in his heart, if he hadn't seen those scenes last night, he wouldn't have known that everything was actually Xiang when experimenting on patients. It really sounded like a plot of a malicious ghost. Indeed, Jiang Xian couldn't be blamed for being so scared. Okay, I know you saw a ghost. If there's nothing else, I'm going to continue watching TV. Let's talk at night." Guan Shan saw Lu Duk standing outside the door. He pretended to be impatient and pushed Jiang Xian away. "You're cured, so naturally you can go out. So I suggest you see a doctor. If you think your doctor is not good, I recommend Dr. Lu to you. Her medical skills are very good. I hope you recover soon." Although he reminded Jiang Xian slightly, Guan Shan didn't think that relying on Lu Qiuqiu would be useful. Discharge required the approval of the director and the deputy director. The deputy director was Xiang Wan, so it was equivalent to walking into a trap. If he forcibly discharged the patient, who knew how many people would believe Su Rong, who was judged to be mentally ill, when there wasn't enough evidence? Moreover, many of the patients treated by Xiang Wan were voluntarily allowed to stay in Sacred-Cœur Hospital by their families. When the time came, if Xiang Wan reversed the truth, these people might really support him. Even if Guan Shan and Ji Xiaolan were alive, they probably wouldn't be able to defend themselves. Jiang Xian immediately showed anger when he heard this. He pointed at Guan Shan in exasperation. "I've already said so much, and you still don't believe me?" Lu Duk saw that he was too agitated, so she quickly stepped forward to stop him. "Mr. Jiang, please don't make a noise in the ward." On the other side, the caregiver in charge of Jiang Xian also hurried over. Without saying anything, he directly used a tranquilizer on Jiang Xian. Guan Shan furrowed his brows and asked, "Is his condition that serious?" The caregiver explained the deputy director conducted a test and evaluation on this patient yesterday. He believes that his illness has a certain degree of aggressiveness and should be transferred to the critical area. The procedures should be completed tomorrow. Just now, he was very likely to cause harm to you. Using a tranquilizer is a necessary measure. Wasn't the deputy director Xiangwen? The Sacred Coeur Hospital had really become his sole authority. Those words from before were probably used specifically to make Su Rong's parents anxious, so that they would fall into his trap. Guanshan shook his head, feeling that his reminder just now was in vain. He watched the caregiver send Jiang Xian back to his ward, and then sent him to the critical area, which was the fourth building where Su Rong was. Thinking that he might have alerted the enemy last night, he felt that it would be his turn tonight. Let's wait for one night. If they don't do anything to me tonight, then I'll go directly to the basement. As long as there are witnesses and material evidence, there won't be a big problem. Guanshan looked out the window. Su Rong was no longer among the patients who were on the lawn. 11 o'clock in the evening. Xiangwen walked in the corridor and headed to Guanshan's ward. The silhouette being followed him in the shadows, observing the surroundings vigilantly. Since he failed to find another peeping Tom yesterday, he had been very suspicious. Xiangwen took out the key, opened the door of Guanshan's ward, and whispered, "This person's identity is strange. He is a reporter. I think he probably came here because of Su Rong. But he will never know the truth." The silhouette being was taken aback. He suddenly remembered a certain paranormal he had heard recently. Reporter, PS1. Thank you for the reward. PS2, please vote. Chapter 105. Because he needed to act secretly, the silhouette being did not have much contact with other paranormals. But he knew the existence of some civilian paranormal organizations, and he would often turn into a shadow to gather information. Most of these civilian paranormal organizations had a semi-official nature, but they also had the function of intelligence circulation. Of course, the silhouette being did not expect them to know any secrets, but as long as they knew whether there were any C-class paranormals nearby recently, it would be enough to avoid most of the risks. In addition to the official war between the Taiyan Formation and the Killer Bees, there was also a new C-class paranormal. It was said that it was this ability user who had dealt a devastating blow to the outer perimeter of the Killer Bees. He had single-handedly killed 7 of the worker bees, and 2 of the drones had never returned. But who this person was, what his ability was, and what level his energy level was, were all covered up by the Taiyan Formation. There is only one plausible rumor that this person's profession was a reporter, and he was currently a member of the Taiyan Formation. Therefore, when the silhouette being heard the word reporter, his heart skipped a beat. I just heard about that paranormal, and now I'm meeting a reporter. Is it really such a coincidence? The silhouette being had a trace of doubt in his heart, and he stopped Xiangwen. But now the Taiyan Formation and the Killer Bees are fighting each other, and that reporter should also be involved. Why would he come here inexplicably? Just to be safe, the silhouette being still took out the energy detector he got from the overconfident paranormal yesterday. Incompetent level reaction. The silhouette being breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that there was no fluctuation on the detector. If it was the rumored reporter who came here, he might not be able to defeat him. After all, even the infamous Death Sickle and Raccoon had failed. Since there was no reaction, naturally, it was impossible for him to be a paranormal. He was worried too much. Xiangwen asked suspiciously in a low voice, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, I just confirmed something." "Let's continue." The silhouette being replied. Although Xiangwen was confused, he didn't think too much about it. Since the silhouette being said that it was fine, then it was fine. Xiangwen couldn't intervene in the battle between paranormals. Most of the time, the silhouette being wouldn't tell him what he was thinking. He was only responsible for the research and experiments. Xiangwen pushed the door open. However, what greeted them was not a patient lying obediently on the hospital bed, but an extremely dazzling light in the room that was instantly turned on, a young man standing in the middle of the room with a gun in one hand and a sharp blade in the other, looking at them. Guanshan was indeed lying quietly on his bed. He was thinking about how he would record the evidence if Xiangwen came over. Then he would seize the opportunity to capture this guy and his accomplice. However, after staring at the ceiling for half an hour, Guanshan finally heard the sound of the door opening. Before he could rejoice, he heard a familiar mechanical voice. Scene scan complete. Generating horror game. What the F asterisk CK? Guan Shan's eyes widened in an instant, and he jumped up from the bed in an instant. He didn't see Xiang Wen, but the simulator restarted after 2 weeks. Generated horror game. One flew over the asylum. Plot loading. Please wait. Plot loading complete. You came to an authoritative mental hospital to treat your illness. During the day, the doctors here were all smiling, and the patients were harmonious. The atmosphere made you feel as warm as home, and you believed that your illness would definitely be cured. However, at night, the doctors smiled and picked up the scalpel, and the patients took off their own skin. Huh? Why did they push open the door of your ward? Asterisk note. Only by killing the final boss can this simulation end. At the same time, Guan Shan saw the door of the ward being pushed open by someone. The person who pushed the door was shrouded in the shadow behind the door. He could only see the white gloves on his hands, and the white gloves were stained with thick blood. The person's fingers gripped the door frame, and a reddish-brown fingerprint was immediately left on it. Blood flowed down the door frame. Under the dim light of the corridor, just this hand alone was enough to create an extremely terrifying atmosphere. Guan Shan could instantly imagine that the person who was about to push open the door must be a pervert in a white coat. The monster's information appeared at the same time. Stitcher, Dr. LV11. Health points. 100 description. A perfect surgery with precision and elegance. The only exception is that the location is not on the operating table. Guan Shan heaved a sigh of relief. He was already very experienced. A murderer in a hospital? He immediately took out his equipment, and, at the same time, the moment the person stepped into the room, he turned on the light in the room. The light was the only thing in the room that gave him a hint. Light switch. Description. No one can open their eyes in an instant of strong light. Not even a murderer. The glaring, incandescent light lit up the entire room, and it caused strong light pollution to the people who were originally in the dark, and they subconsciously closed their eyes. Bang! Guan Shan did not even think, and immediately fired at the doctor's body, and he instantly saw the doctor's appearance clearly. The face could no longer be called a face. It was a strange face that was pieced together and stitched together by various different faces, and it could be said to be horrible to look at. There were at least 7 or 8 different eyes and 4 or 5 different mouths. The different parts of the face were forcibly pieced together in places where they should not be, and the wriggling muscles could be seen in the gaps. If the driver on the last bus was shameless, then this murderer doctor who appeared in the mental hospital at midnight was thick-skinned. Not only his face, but even the other exposed parts of his body were all like this. F***CK. This is too disgusting. I'm afraid it's the end of the world. Guan Shan glanced at it, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. 346. A number burst out along with the screams of all the mouths on the monster, and it interrupted Guan Shan's disgusting thoughts. He instantly made a judgment based on the number. I didn't hit the vital parts, but this monster's defense is very low, so it's much higher than the basic damage. I can kill it directly. Guan Shan's eyes turned cold, and he immediately activated gravity control, rushed forward with his knife, and slashed at the doctor's face. Guan Shan looked at the stitched face at close range and could not help but say, F***CK. Don't come out and scare people if you're ugly. Swoosh. The blade had already landed on one of the eyes, and a bloody mark was drawn on the face, but it could not go any further, because behind the doctor, a dark shadow split into countless tentacles, half of which blocked Guan Shan's knife, and the other half turned into shadows, entangling Guan Shan's ankle and wrist. P.S. Thanks to Thousand Feathers Huaning, the always sleeping Nicholas, and Little White for their tips. Chapter 106. Boss, Anthrax, Patient. LV, 15. Health points, 15,000. Description. It does not need a physical body because it is the disease of the world. It only disguises itself as a human. The information of the black mist-like tentacle appeared in front of Guan Shan's eyes. The first thought that came to his mind was that the boss's HP was actually considered normal. His second thought was that its attack and defense were definitely not low. After so many times, Guanshan had figured out that the health points of these monsters determined their attributes. Like the one in front of him, most of its attributes were very balanced, and its attack was definitely not weak. And the appearance of this monster was exactly the same as its name. It was like a visible form of anthrax, spreading from the darkness of the corridor along the walls and the air. Wherever it passed, black mold-like spots would grow as the foundation, followed by blisters of various sizes. Soon, the blisters would rot, turning into cracked red-black scabs like charcoal. The walls were painted, but there were human skin-like blisters growing from the inside. The scene was not normal. Guanshan's pupils constricted. After his wrists and ankles were entangled by the black fog, the strange black spots and blisters appeared at the same time, and they quickly spread along his skin. 33, 32, 34, 30. A string of damage numbers kept popping up, and an infected entry appeared in his status bar. It showed that it would slow down his movement, and it would reduce his health points by 1% every 10 minutes. The black fog transformed into a grinning human face, and more tentacles split out and rushed toward Guanshan. Guanshan twisted his wrist, and the demon's sword made an arc downward. The dark blade instantly cut off the black fog that entangled his left hand and left leg. After his left hand was free, he took the demon's sword and cut off the black fog on the other side. He rolled backward and escaped the area covered by the black spots. Guanshan retreated to the window in a hurry. He wanted to break the window and escape, but he realized that the window did not move, and a very classic, "The window seems to be fixed with a space. It does not move," notification popped up. The black spots and blisters had already spread to almost the entire room. "Do you really want me to put on a show of escaping in the hospital?" Guanshan calmly turned his head and took a closer look. He realized that the doctor he had just shot had almost fully recovered his HP. All the eyes on the doctor's stitched face stared at Guanshan and let out overlapping roars. Then he took out a gun from his medicine box and fired immediately. Bang! F***CK. Guanshan rolled away to evade, cursing inwardly. "I knew it. There must be a trap with such low HP." He looked at the remaining blisters on his wrist that had already begun to scab, and the corner of his mouth twitched. "I can't keep this negative status. The reduction in my maximum HP is too cruel." Seeing that the black fog was still surging towards him, Guanshan made a prompt decision and used naive children's painting. Effect: after use, open up a 5m x 5m x 5m space in the painting, making everything in the space become like a children's painting. Lasts for 180 seconds. Cooldown time is 1 hour. Instantly, with Guanshan as the center, everything in the room became a crayon drawing. Pop, pop, pop. In the sound effect, the black spots turned into green grass, the blisters turned into red mushrooms, and the black fog turned into soft white clouds. The doctor turned into a stick man, and the gun in his hand turned into a combination of a vertical and a horizontal. Here, Tonghua was extremely cooperative and drew Sigma, degree, winky face, and W, degree, O degree, W cartoon expressions. Guanshan was stunned. His initial nervousness and fear disappeared, and he even felt like laughing. Of course, the most important thing was that the damage was nullified. The soft clouds came over, the green grass swayed, and the mushrooms grew. Even the touch was as warm and soft as a blanket, without any lethality. The doctor showed an angry for all expression and fired a few shots at Guanshan. But from the vertical and horizontal shots, shot out little red flowers. PFFF, Guanshan picked up a little red flower that landed on him and finally could not hold back his laughter. Of course, at that moment, he had also become a stick man holding a stroke. Naive children's painting was effective on everything in the space. He did not forget about the proper business. Taking advantage of the two monsters becoming children's paintings, he rushed out of the room directly. Guanshan felt that he was in the corridor. After leaving the children's painting area, he immediately used the first aid bandage to remove his negative state. Creak. At the same time, the doors of the other rooms in the corridor had been opened one after another. The patient's ward, as well as the nurse's resting room, had narrow lights that divided the corridor into pieces. The patients who were awakened by the commotion went out to see what was going on. Guanshan took a deep breath, raised the demon's sword, and got into a fighting stance. In front of him, in addition to the patient NPCs, there were also the nurse who had a monster logo. The women in nurse uniforms staggered out from behind the door, holding fire axes, pistols, and other weapons in their hands. Their faces only had a big, bloody mouth that was cracked all the way to the root, and their mouths were full of teeth. Their exposed skin was full of rotten blisters and blood scabs. Their clothes were soaked in blood and stuck to their bodies, outlining their graceful curves. Black spots also spread on the ground wherever they passed. Infected nurse, LV, 6, health points, 600 description. Have you seen my patient? I need to take care of him. Guanshan's mouth twitched, huh? Take care of him with axes and guns? The health points of these nurses looked normal, but with the doctor's example, Guanshan believed that their self-healing ability must be extremely strong. Therefore, he had to kill them in one shot and eliminate them completely. The nurse who rushed in front of Guanshan first came out from the nurse's lounge that corresponded to his room. That was originally Lu Duk's lounge, but now there was only a monster in front of him. Patient, my care. The nurse opened her bloody mouth and made a strange sound. At the same time, she raised the fire axe in her hand and rushed towards Guanshan. In Guanshan's eyes, a monster of this level was no longer a threat, other than looking a little scary. He turned sideways and easily dodged the attack. He was extremely calm. He turned around and stepped forward, slashing at the neck of the nurse monster. Kacha! The crisp sound showed that the blade had smoothly cut through the muscle and bone. Guanshan neatly put away the knife, and the head rolled. A large amount of blood spurted out of the nurse's neck, and then she slowly fell down. Experience plus 500. A patient NPC walked out of the ward in a daze. Blood splattered all over his head and face. He was so frightened that he screamed and hurriedly scrambled backward. The young man who passed by in front of him, his hospital gown was already stained with blood, but his face was very familiar. For a moment, he felt that the world had gone crazy. His eyes were dull, and his voice trembled as he murmured, Guanshan, PS1. Thank you to Izadu Sakuya and Hogo Wukue for the reward. PS2 morning. Hands on hips. Chapter 107. Jiang Xian didn't sleep well that night. Seeing the ghost again the night before made him very nervous. As soon as he laid on the bed, he felt that a dark shadow would appear at any time. So he simply stayed on his bed in a daze. But the more he lay like this, the more scared Jiang Xian became. The hospital at night was simply the best location for a horror movie. The silent room fell into darkness, and under the faint light, everything seemed to become treacherous. Jiang Xian was so scared that he froze on the bed, not daring to move at all. He only hoped that God of Zhou would quickly take him away. The occasional noise in the corridor would make his mind fill in the blanks for 5 minutes. He could only try his best to think of other things to prevent himself from being scared to death before the ghost came. But Jiang Xian had other things to think about during this period of time in the hospital. So naturally, he thought of Guanshan, who he had been thinking about day and night recently. Jiang Xian became angry when he thought of this. If I wasn't framed by that master gone, he wouldn't have the chance to give me that look. He humbly begged Guanshan to save him, but this person looked like he didn't care. When he asked him about his connections, he really only told him the name Dr. Liu. If he could go to those doctors for help, would he be trapped in this hospital for so many days? Those ordinary doctors didn't have the right to make decisions at all. The problem with this hospital was with the higher-ups. That doctor could let Guanshan in, but he couldn't let him out. When the time came, as long as the director or vice director said something, normal people would immediately become abnormal. If you resisted, you would directly become seriously ill. How would you have the chance to leave? Jiang Xian felt that there was something wrong with basically everyone in this hospital during this period of time, including most of the nurses and doctors. When he asked for help, everyone looked on coldly as if they didn't hear anything. It wasn't easy for Guanshan to come, but the result was still the same. The more Jiang Xian thought about it, the angrier he got. Thinking about how he would be transferred to the ICU tomorrow, he felt even sadder. Even the fear in his heart was not as strong as before. If I could go back, I would do everything in my power to fire Guanshan Bang. Suddenly, a loud noise and a scream came from next door. Jiang Xian shuddered and rolled out of bed in horror. Gunshots. He had been to the shooting club before, so there was no way he had heard wrongly. This was a real gunshot. But how could there be gunshots in a hospital? And from the sound of it, it was in Guanshan's ward next door. Who was hit? Could it be a terrorist attack? Jiang Xian's heart was filled with panic and fear. He heard more sounds coming from next door, as if someone was fighting. He trembled and lay on the ground, not daring to move. However, he was afraid that his room would be affected after the fight was over. He hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, and decided to push open the door and go out. Maybe I can take the opportunity to escape from the hospital. Jiang Xian carefully pushed open the door. He saw that the doors of the wards and the resting rooms in the corridor were all open. Some patients were looking out, and the nurses were coming out one after another. Jiang Xian's heart tightened. I have to hurry, or I won't have a chance later. Just as he was about to go out, the door of the ward next door was slammed open. Bang! A figure rushed out of the ward. Before Jiang Xian could see the figure clearly, he saw the nurse in charge of Guanshan, named Lu Duk, coming out of the resting room with an axe. Her eyes had become pitch black, and her body was covered in black fog, as if she was possessed by something. She raised the axe and chopped at the figure. In the blink of an eye, the two passed by each other, and Lu Duk's head fell to the ground. As for Jiang Xian, he finally saw who the figure was. Guanshan. Jiang Xian was completely scared out of his wits. He collapsed on the ground, looked at the headless female corpse, and swallowed his saliva. Even though Lu Duk was obviously not right, she was the nurse who had been with Guanshan for a week. A few days ago, he was still chatting happily with this nurse. Now, he turned around and beheaded her without hesitation. Jiang Xian recalled his attitude and manner towards Guanshan. He felt a chill on the back of his neck, and he almost fainted. Guanshan seemed to have heard his voice. He frowned and turned to look at him. He shook the blood off his knife and murmured, "This is troublesome. There's so many NPCs this time. How do we protect them?" Jiang Xian did not understand, but he heard the word protect clearly. At the same time, a blood-soaked doctor rushed out from Guanshan's ward. He had a panicked expression on his face, and there was also a large patch of black shadows. Although he only caught a glimpse of Guanshan's open door, Jiang Xian could see many illusory arms stretching out from hell. Some of the illusory arms even grabbed onto the doctor's arms and the gun in his hand. They also grabbed onto the shadows. The doctor's expression did not look like that of a pursuer. Instead, he looked like a fugitive who had broken free from the arms. As for the pitch-black shadows, the moment they appeared, they transformed into human form. The familiarity of this figure caused Jiang Xian's mind to buzz. At this moment, he was incomparably clear-headed. This was the ghost he had been seeing all this time. Guanshan pondered for a second. He felt that it was too difficult to protect so many NPCs in this instance dungeon. It was better to ensure that he obtained the basic reward. Forget it. Killing monsters is more important. Guanshan shook his head. Seeing that the monsters behind him were catching up, he prepared to kill his way out and find a more spacious place. Jiang Xian saw that Guanshan was about to turn around and leave. Seeing that the figure was coming in his direction, he was instantly terrified. He made the best decision of his life. Ghost or human? Was there even a need to choose? Jiang Xian quickly got up and threw himself at Guanshan. He was practically prostrating himself on the ground as he shouted, "Save me!" Guanshan frowned. Then he relaxed. The simulator appeared again. According to it, no matter how many NPCs were saved, there would be additional rewards. The only difference was how many NPCs were saved. Since that was the case, there was no harm in trying to save one. Guanshan used the same trick again. He grabbed Jiang Xian and killed his way out. Jiang Xian was shocked by the sight, and his heart trembled with fear. Guanshan was ruthless and decisive. He was like a skilled butcher, without any emotion to speak of. Killing people was as easy as cutting grass. Even the sound of cutting people's bodies was almost inaudible. It could be seen that his technique was exquisite. Even if he was occasionally injured, there was no trace of emotion on his face. He was so calm that it was scary. And every time he killed a person, the blood-red pattern on the sword in his hand would become brighter. Jiang Xian's heart was filled with mixed feelings of fear and regret. He couldn't help but think, this guy, who is he? Killer? Mercenary? Or is he not a human at all? The same question also appeared in Xiang Wen's mind. Xiang Wen, who was chasing behind him, gradually became exhausted. The silhouette being said decisively, "Go to the basement and release those experimental subjects. I'm afraid we won't be able to defeat them alone." Xiang Wen couldn't help but ask, "Who is he? What was that thing just now?" Just now, Guanshan stretched out his hand and pressed a strange drawing paper on the ground. The little girl's strange laughter immediately sounded. Then, countless terrifying arms stretched out from the walls around them, and even from inside their bodies. They surrounded them like ghosts, and all the attacks they launched were blocked by these arms. As more and more arms appeared, the silhouette being felt like he was drowning in them. He could see and hear the faces and whispers of countless dead people. He didn't want to experience that kind of strange and terrifying scene again in his life. The silhouette being gritted his teeth and said, "Big trouble. He is a psychic from the Tan formation. If we can't get rid of him, we will be dead." PS1. Thank you for the tip. PS2 knock. Chapter 108. For paranormal criminals, the word Tay and formation was equivalent to the police. Now that their criminal nest had been infiltrated by the police, wouldn't that be a big problem? Xiang Wen was dazed for a moment, and then he panicked. If he is from the Tan formation, doesn't that mean that the Tan formation has already discovered us? After so many years of hiding, this was the first time he had encountered someone from the Tan formation head-on. More importantly, the silhouette being, who had always been confident, showed signs of nervousness for the first time. "Don't panic," the silhouette being said in a low voice. "If the Tan formation really took action, why would they come alone? They wouldn't ignore the lives of those patients. Not to mention that they are busy fighting with the killer bees now. So now he must have come to investigate by himself. As long as we kill him first, we will have time to move to a safe place." The silhouette being regretted it very much. Now he suddenly understood that the peeping Tom that he couldn't find yesterday was Guanshan. If he could think of these two things just now, and think that Guanshan might have a special way to hide himself from the detection of the energy detector, then he would definitely not let Xiang Wen open that door. In this way, at least they would have more time to take a detour instead of directly revealing all their trump cards at this time. However, he had no choice but to do so, because this person was someone who had once killed 2 peak C-class metahumans. Why was the silhouette being so sure? He had the strength of a C-class paranormal, and he was a professional journalist. Once he added these 2 labels, he would be a fool if he still couldn't associate him with a famous journalist. Just from the confrontation just now, the silhouette being could feel that Guanshan's strength was at least not inferior to him. The battle situation changed rapidly, but when the 2 of them were entangled by those arm phantoms, Guanshan actually laughed as if he had seen something funny. Based on this alone, the silhouette being concluded that this person was definitely not an idiot from the Tan formation. Trying to use those nurses who had been brainwashed more than 3 times and had completely lost their self-awareness to play the emotional card was a complete fool's dream. The silhouette said, "He is now walking towards the hall. I will guide him. You take a detour to the basement through the secret passage. Release the experimental subjects and block the entrance." Xiang Wen nodded and didn't dawdle. He immediately ran in the direction of the secret passage. The silhouette being turned into a dark shadow and blended into the night. Wherever he passed, all the light bulbs would break, creating a completely dark environment. To him, the night was his home court. On the other side, Xiangwen rushed to the basement as fast as he could. The entire basement was their experimental base. It was filled with all kinds of experimental equipment, bottles, jars, failed drugs, and failed specimens. Other than that, there were a large number of cages and chains. Apart from the outermost cage where the newly captured D-Class Paranormal was kept, the rest of the cages were filled with wriggling giant chunks of meat. These chunks of meat were swollen like dough, and there were traces of hands and feet on them. There were also clothes on the ground that had already turned into rags, but the grape-like sarcomas had changed them beyond recognition. This was the result of the active drug going out of control. The almost infinite proliferation of cells and softened muscles, when the two were combined, formed such a monster. Xiangwen walked over, opened the cages one by one, and whispered with a smile, "Come out, there is food." Squeak, squeak. Those chunks of meat made a strange sound, and when they overlapped, they sounded particularly terrifying. The sarcomas on their bodies began to wriggle like the countless small feet of caterpillars, crawling on the ground with their heavy bodies. Wherever they passed, they left a slippery mucus mark on the ground. Squeak, squeak, squeak. These chunks of meat surrounded Xiangwen as if they were his father, rubbing him with their sarcomas. Xiangwen's fatherly smile almost froze, but he still repeated softly with a stiff face, "Come out. Hurry up. The one who doesn't have the same smell is the food." Squeak, squeak, squeak. Those chunks of meat finally understood his meaning and followed Xiangwen out of the basement through the secret passage. In the dark basement, the unconscious paranormal opened his eyes. He squinted his eyes and looked around. After confirming that the monsters had all left, he heaved a sigh of relief and threw the broken iron chain aside. This psychic was called Qinggu, and he belonged to the Tin Formation, but he did not belong to the Youhao group, which was managed by Xiaolei. The incident could be traced back to about a month ago. One of the Youhao group's cannon fodder with the ability high-speed self-healing was sacrificed during a mission. According to the regulations, the remaining body needed to be sent to the corresponding research institute for research. But as everyone knew, the Youhao group's research institute had just been attacked by the killer bees, and now they were unable to conduct research, so they needed to be sent to the Tin Formation team in another area. That was the high brigade that Qinggu was in. However, not long ago, they found out that someone was secretly selling the research results and extracted part of the genes. So, they sent someone to investigate. They found out that it was the Sacred Hospital. Then, I was King caught. When Qinggu walked out of the basement, he felt that he was extremely unlucky. He was a little scared. There are 2 Class C psychics hiding here, and they are conducting such inhumane experiments. Qinggu found the hospital's public phone and reported the incident to his captain. At the same time, he also saw the shadow that was gradually spreading in the opposite hospital building. He reported that there was a suspected psychic who was fighting and asked for backup. Qinggu was worried. A Class C and so many high-speed self-healing test subjects. How difficult would it be for that person to fight? Guanshan led Jiang Xian and killed a bloody path. Along the way, they did not let any of the monsters go. They were all beheaded or slashed at the waist to prevent them from having the chance to self-heal. The increase in experience points and the attack power of the Devil Sword had completely overshadowed his fear of the appearance of the monsters. On the contrary, this trace of nervousness made the killing more exciting. This was the first time Guanshan had felt so comfortable and relaxed when playing a simulator. He was even a little excited. Although they're both unparalleled compared to using a gun to headshot, using a cold weapon is indeed more fun. However, the main reason was that the attack power of the Underworld Devil Sword was high enough. With a basic attack power of 1,200, it was able to kill these low-level monsters instantly. If it had been the boning knife or the high-speed saw from before, it would have probably gotten stuck halfway. It would not have been so smooth. When they reached the relatively spacious hall on the first floor, he threw Jiang Xian to a corner. As soon as he landed, Jiang Xian's face turned pale and he began to vomit. He threw up everything he ate the day before. On one hand, he was stimulated by the bloody scene. On the other hand, Guanshan was dodging and moving around while killing the monsters. He was purely treating him like a gunny sack. He swung his head back and forth until it was almost evenly distributed. After he finished vomiting, he became much more clear-headed. He found that the disgusting smell of his vomit was not as pungent as the thick smell of blood on Guanshan's body. Thinking of the miserable situation along the way, Jiang Xian swallowed a mouthful of acid. He trembled in the corner and did not dare to raise his head to look at Guanshan. He now felt weak, helpless, and pitiful from the bottom of his heart. Guanshan moved his wrist and spun the devil's sword. Looking at the sinister black fog, he put on the mask of pain and said, "Hide well. Otherwise, if you die later, I won't be responsible. P.S. Thank you to the Warrior of Love Wild, Little White, and book friend 201-8080-111445-8829 for your tips. Especially thank you to the Warrior of Love Wild for your tip of 100,000 to become the second Alliance Master of this book. There will be 3 chapters today. Chapter 109. Jiang Xian was stunned when he heard that. Then, he immediately rolled and crawled to the corner of the hall stairs. Although he had just vomited, he still ran with the momentum of a 100-meter sprint. Just from the speed of Jiang Xian's movements at this moment, one could not tell that he was a middle-aged man in his 40s who lived like a prince. This meant that sometimes a person's potential was really limitless. It was just that they had not encountered the right opportunity. As soon as Jiang Xian hid behind the staircase, the shadow immediately covered the sky and covered the earth. In an instant, the entire dimly lit hall became devoid of any light. The inpatient building's hall was decorated with the usual gorgeous and noble style of Sacré-Cœur Hospital. There were marble pillars on all sides, and spiral stairs on both sides led to the 3rd floor. After that, it turned into an elevator. It was about 30 meters high, and in the center was a circular duty counter. In Guanshan's eyes, the entire hall was like a human lesion that had suffered from anthrax. As the black spots, blood vessels, large and small blisters, and rotten blood gradually covered all the walls. The blisters were still bursting, and yellow blood flowed out. Just looking at it made one feel like they were about to be infected. The black fog swirled and flowed like an ocean of bacteria. It came in all kinds of shapes and forms, either spraying, sweeping, or wrapping around from all directions. It attacked Guanshan in all kinds of ways. Guanshan rushed forward, and at the same time, he immediately activated gravity manipulation to dodge. Now that he was more and more familiar with using this skill, he was no longer simply increasing and decreasing the gravity of an object. Instead, he was trying to distribute the weight, and by changing the direction of gravity, he was trying to pull the object more precisely. This way, the calculation of using the skill was more complicated, but the actual performance was more flexible. For example, at this moment, he could use gravity manipulation to achieve a state similar to flying in midair, shuttling through the black fog while swinging his sword to attack. Swoosh! 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 The shadows were like clouds and fog, strangling Guanshan. The black fog moved much faster than Guanshan, so he had to accurately determine the trajectory of these attacks. Thanks to his level 13 physical fitness, his reaction speed and dynamic vision had been greatly enhanced. It was just a little difficult for him to achieve this. Guanshan dodged to the left and right in a thrilling manner. He turned his body sideways and missed by a hair's breadth. Then, he immediately took the opportunity to swing his saber and cut off the black fog. Pooh! The bubble that was growing in the air burst in an instant, bursting into a yellow mist. Guanshan hurriedly let gravity pull him back, and he landed on a piece of relatively clean ground. The black fog did not give up. It directly descended from the ceiling like a waterfall, silently pressing down on Guanshan. At this moment, the duration of gravity manipulation was up. F***CK. Guanshan was overwhelmed. He broke out in a cold sweat and hurriedly rolled forward. What followed was even more black fog. There were fewer and fewer places to stand in the hall. The black fog seemed to be endless, multiplying in the darkness. and this boss's HP had only been reduced by less than 4,000. Guanshan dodged as he thought to himself, this negative status of infection is too disgusting. If it's not removed, my HP will be reduced by 1% every 10 minutes. I don't have the first aid bandage on my hand now, which means that I can't be touched by it. But to activate the pain mask, I have to take damage. Swoosh! The black fog's attacks became more frequent, and the entire hall was almost completely destroyed. Guanshan waited for gravity manipulation to cool down. His eyes flashed. No, there's only one chance. The Xidagarba statue's shield can let me take 1 damage, but I have to kill it before the shield expires. The most difficult thing is that this boss doesn't seem to have a weakness, and it doesn't seem to have a body. I can only attack it with my saber. The surrounding black fog gathered and attacked again. Guanshan stomped his feet, and the gravity disappeared. Like a swallow in a storm, he rushed into the chaotic black fog again. Because there was basically no place to stand on the first floor, this time he rushed all the way up to about the same level as the 3rd floor. Guanshan narrowed his eyes and found something strange. Looking down from here, there was no sense of being surrounded by the black fog. And it was obvious that the black fog had an area, but it was hard to distinguish it from the shadows around it. Those blisters would turn into blood scabs after a period of time, and they would no longer be infectious after they coagulated. These blisters were formed with the black fog as the foundation. So, those blisters were actually the area of the black fog. I see. Guanshan was enlightened and had a rough idea of the size of this boss. But what's the use of this? Shit. Guanshan's lips twitched, and he was ready to rush down to fight the boss again. After all, the skill's duration would not be suspended. When he turned around, he was suddenly stunned. No, wait. It's useful. In front of Guanshan, because the Sacred Hospital was built by a missionary, there was a huge decorative piece of stained glass between the marble pillars at the front of the hall. It was carved with the image of the Virgin Mary, and that piece of stained glass was currently reflecting Guanshan's reflection. Good heavens, this thing counts as a mirror, right? Guanshan raised his eyebrows and suddenly had an idea. He took out an item that he obtained from the previous dungeon. Mirror fragment. Effect. When this mirror fragment faces another mirror, an infinite loop space will be formed between them. It will last for 10 seconds before disappearing. Each mirror can only be used once. There's a chance to summon the existence in the mirror. Whoosh! Guanshan quickly dived down and found the right time to lure the stained glass. However, at that moment, the area below him was where the blisters were the most concentrated. He would be walking right into the trap. The black fog immediately rolled toward him like a wave and slammed him against the wall. Bang! F***. Fortunately, Guanshan reacted quickly. While raising the demon blade with both hands to block, he immediately used Xidagarba's statue. Enhancement 7. Immovable Defense. The shadow of a shield was immediately formed. It sizzled as it was corroded by the bursting blisters. Guanshan looked at the rapidly decreasing shield bar and felt that time was running out. He used all his strength to swing the demon blade forward. At the same time, he increased the gravity to the maximum and pulled himself forward. Poof, poof, poof. He pushed the demon blade and endured the damage from the black fog. He split open the blisters and suddenly broke open a blank path. At that moment, Guanshan immediately turned around and used Mirror Fragment to form a stained glass, boss mirror, and a 3-point line. Guanshan raised the mirror in his hand and aimed it at the stained glass. The mirror instantly floated up and turned into a white line. It then spread out, and the same happened on the other side of the glass. Guanshan was still curious about what kind of infinite space it was, but he found that the boss was frozen in place and did not move at all. PS1. Thank you to Starry Sky Eyes, A Cat Under the Sun, and Ningjing Yuan for the tips. PS2. Continue writing. I feel like I'm going to write until the wee hours of the morning again. Chapter 110. In an instant, the black fog that was moving all the time, as well as the squirming bubbles, were frozen in place. It was as if the area was locked by an unknown existence, and then pressed the time stop button. Even the particles that were separated from the black fog could be seen clearly. The pus that emerged from the bursting bubbles also stopped in midair to form a strangely beautiful trajectory. I thought it was an infinite loop space. Why does it seem like I'm trapped in an infinite loop? Guanshan could not help but be curious. He did not know how the boss felt in this space. However, now was not the time to be curious. This was because the space formed by the mirror could only last for 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, it would disappear immediately. If he could not take the opportunity to kill the boss, it would be another fierce battle. Guanshan picked up the demon's sword and slashed wildly. Based on the fact that he had killed so many monsters along the way, his basic attack had increased to 1,300 points. As long as he could slash 10 times, the monster would die. Unfortunately, things did not go according to his wishes. He had only slashed 4 times when he heard a strange noise. Ugh! Pig's cry? Guanshan was stunned. He suddenly felt confused. Then he saw a group of strange monsters that looked like huge fat pigs, but had no heads. They were strange monsters that only had a lump of flesh. They rushed from the other side of the corridor. The legs of these pigs were chopped off, and many pieces of connective tissue grew out. They were squirming on the ground, dragging their huge bodies to move. From under their fat folds, there were many strange insect-like limbs that were dancing wantonly. It was as if under the skin of these monsters, in their bodies, there were parasites that were controlling them. At the same time, the monster's information appeared in front of Guanshan. It was very clear that the monsters in the hospital were all transformed from diseases, and they also used diseases as their own symbol. Tumor, patient, LV-14. Health points? Description: please do not disturb them. Their souls are like candles in the wind. Only their empty shells are still eating and growing. Guanshan was dumbfounded. He repeatedly checked the information of all the tumor patients and finally confirmed that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. What the F***CK? I can still accept the 110,000 HP of an entire apartment building. This monster doesn't even show me its HP. Do you want me to guess? Or is the simulator finally broken? Guanshan felt a deep sense of despair as he couldn't even tell how much health this monster had. Because it wasn't just one, but a group. How do we fight this? How can I play her like this? Guanshan didn't even want to fight with such a bug-like monster. He broke out in cold sweat. Now, we can only hope that we can slay the boss in the remaining time. That way, we can directly end the dungeon. As for killing all of them, I don't want to. Okay. Guanshan became nervous. His heart raced. He gritted his teeth and continued to slash at the boss. At the same time, he saw the monsters approaching him. Only when they walked over could they be seen. When they wriggled, the connective tissue under their bodies would appear. Guanshan was stunned. That is a mouth? That's right, it really was a mouth. On this point, Guanshan soon had a reliable experience, so he had the right to speak. Those headless monsters, which were almost as tall as a human, were completely made up of fat. They emitted a strange, pig-like sound as they surrounded Guanshan. Then, they suddenly raised their bodies backward. Layers upon layers of fat clamped down on the insects that were dancing like arthropods. When they leaned back, the only organ that belonged to a human was revealed below their bodies. A mouth that was 2 meters long. The mouth was spread out horizontally under the monster's body. 2 bright red lips, teeth, and a tongue were all present. If it was placed on the face of a normal human, it wouldn't look out of place. However, this thing was installed on the monster's body. The mouth wriggled and opened, revealing yellowed teeth that were like guillotines. The tongue stuck out from the monster's abdominal cavity and lashed out, bringing with it a pile of sticky saliva. Coupled with the retraction of the connective tissue on both sides, it was so disgusting that it could drive anyone crazy. Compared to the black fog and water bubbles, this thing with the Valley of Horror effect was more terrifying. F***CK, 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 don't come over. Guanshan was scared out of his wits. He still needed one last slash. However, The monsters behind him opened their mouths and were about to bite him. The huge tongue stuck out and was about to lick him. The stench coming from the mouth was clear, and there was also the increasingly clear sound of a pig's cry. F*CK, 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 F*CK. What the hell is this thing? Guanshan had goosebumps all over his body, and the veins on his forehead bulged. In just 1 second, he tightened his grip on the sword. In the end, he couldn't hold back and turned around to slash at the tumor patient closest to him. Slash! The demon's sword instantly cut off the tongue and the layers of fat on the monster's body. Other than the fresh blood, there was a pile of white fat. The fat grew at an extremely fast speed and immediately filled up the cut. There was even an extra part. The severed tongue also grew back in an instant. Seeing this, Guanshan finally understood why the monster's HP was. With this self-healing speed, doesn't it mean that the more I kill, the more I gain? Guanshan's heart sank. The mirror fragment that trapped the boss was also on cooldown. The white line disappeared instantly, and the frozen boss regained its mobility with its remaining 2,000 HP. Guanshan immediately became alert and took off again. He rushed into the air and was ready to fight. At this moment, the black fog that was out of control was like a headless fly, scurrying everywhere. In this darkness, it was like a fish in water, but now it was like a grasshopper in a pot of boiling oil. However, even so, its destructive power was not to be underestimated. Guanshan could only dodge in a panic. Soon, he was exhausted and landed on the ground again. The tumor patients swarmed forward again and surrounded him. While being attacked from both sides, Guanshan saw the doctor standing at the side of the corridor with a gun aimed at him. Guanshan was shocked and panicked. This can't go on. I have to kill one of them as soon as possible. He subconsciously looked through his backpack to see if he had any other items. When he saw the soul-sucking bell, Guanshan immediately thought of the description of the tumor patients. The soul is like a candle in the wind. Guanshan's eyes lit up. The simulator will not give an unsolvable situation. This monster must have its weakness, which is the soul. Soul-sucking bell. Effect. Separates the unstable soul from a body and causes a certain amount of damage to the soul. Description. Ding-ling-ling. Guanshan immediately took it out. As he shook it, he used the skill that he bought from the shop not long ago. Soul-burning whistle. PS1. Thank you for the tip that got kicked by a dog. PS2. Thank you for this update. It was a little late, but it's still the 3rd update. Not self-righteous. Chapter 111. Soul-burning whistle. Level 1. Effect. Blowing the whistle will trigger the soul-burning flame of resentment, burning the soul to ashes and preventing reincarnation. Description. The favorite sound of the vengeful spirits from hell. It is sorrowful and melancholic, just like someone's song. This was the skill that Guanshan had bought from the shop to replace the now-defunct magnetic field nerve. He felt that this skill was definitely a godly skill against ghost-type monsters. The only problem was, what if the person who used this skill did not know how to whistle? Fine, even if they did not know how to whistle, the simulator could help. Ding-ling-ling, Guanshan shook the soul-sucking bell in his hand, and a crisp and distant sound rang out. Rings of sound waves rippled around the bell and slowly spread out. But perhaps it was not slow. Guanshan saw that the movement of the monsters had slowed down. He felt that after the soul-sucking bell was activated, there might be a temporary bullet time effect. This was the first time that Guanshan had used this item, and he was pleasantly surprised. This is not bad. I have another use for this item. I can shake it whenever I want. If I can shake the monster's soul out, that would be even better. Even if I can't, I can still enjoy the bullet time effect. The tangible sound waves rippled out, and when they passed through the giant pieces of meat, they seemed to encounter some kind of resistance and stopped for a moment. Then, like a hook, they hooked out broken souls from the pieces of meat. These souls were roughly in the shape of a human, but upon closer inspection, the silhouette was a mess inside, like a fried dough twist. After these souls were extracted, the flesh instantly lost its aggressiveness and vitality to grow again. The huge mouth blankly closed, and the part that was originally raised back fell to the ground with a bang. In an instant, it shrank to 1/3 of its original size, and then wriggled and crawled everywhere. F***CK. Guanshan was disgusted. The description given by the simulator is not fake. This thing is just a piece of meat that can eat. Even though they had lost their souls, these pieces of meat could still move. Like Paramecia, they only had the survival instinct of the physical body left. Those souls, on the other hand, opened their mouths wide and howled in pain in midair. They trembled violently like candles in the wind. Guanshan whistled at this moment. Anyway, this soul-searing whistle didn't specify how to blow it. Therefore, he played the famous whistle from Kill Bill, Twisted Night, which was also the underworld music that was often used in many horror videos. It fits the occasion. Boom! When the mournful whistle sounded, those souls were instantly wrapped in blue flames and turned into burning torches. Ah! The souls screamed miserably in the flames. They struggled, rolled, begged for mercy, and knelt down, but it was all to no avail. The whistle did not stop, and the flames did not go out. Guanshan looked at the hellish scene in front of him. Surrounded by the sea of fire, he whistled as he raised his demon blade to destroy the bodies of the tumor patients. EXP plus 4,500. EXP plus 4,000. These monsters have a lot of health. When he was about to kill the last monster, Guanshan heard a faint humming sound. The humming sound was accompanied by the whistle, but it was faintly discernible. It was soft and was covered by the whistle and the screams of the souls. At this moment, when the souls were burned to ashes, even the ashes were swept away by the tongue of fire. Nothing was left. It was truly impossible to reincarnate. The humming sound suddenly became clear. It was soft and gentle, as if it was right behind him. Why do I feel that this sound is a little familiar? Guanshan was puzzled and turned around subconsciously, but there was nothing in front of him. Just as he was about to identify the sound, the whistling stopped, and the humming disappeared as well. At the same time, the bullet time effect of the soul-summoning bell faded. There was a bang sound. It turned out that the doctor had finally pulled the trigger and shot at Guanshan. Guanshan was about to dodge, but the black mist of residual blood that had been waiting for him exploded and turned into a whirlpool, entangling him. The counterattack before death was so powerful that it was like a python strangling its prey. Oh no! Guanshan's pupils contracted. He only had time to tilt his head to avoid the first bullet. The infected status appeared in the status bar, making his movements more sluggish. You devil, go to hell. The doctor showed a ferocious and excited smile. His expression was a little crazy, and his voice trembled with fear. His hand movements were nimble. After changing the magazine, he fired dozens of shots at Guanshan. Bang, bang, bang. In the continuous gunshots, 7 or 8 bullet holes appeared on Guanshan's body. One even hit his right eye. After the eyeball burst, the bullet went through the entire right side of his brain. Ugh. Guanshan could instantly feel that his breathing became difficult and he lost half of his vision. In front of him, there was only the scarlet red blood and the dark red warning that his health was about to be depleted. The black fog wrapped around him tighter and tighter, lifting him into the air. Gradually, he could hear the sound of bones breaking and organs being squeezed. Guanshan even hallucinated some scenes of the past appearing before his eyes. Could it be no? F***CKU, there's still a chance. The last tumor monster was on the ground in front of him. At this moment, after killing all the way from the ward to the hall, Guanshan's experience had reached 395 for 040000. He only needed this last bit of experience to level up. After leveling up, he would instantly be full of health. Guanshan opened his eyes wide. He first used all the painkillers to hang on to his last breath. Then, he held the knife with both hands and used all his strength to open a gap. He let go of a knife in his hand and used gravity control at the same time. Guanshan threw the demon knife in his hand. The spinning blade instantly turned into a dazzling silver arc whoosh. Poochie. The sharp blade stabbed into the body of the last tumor monster, ending its life. At the same time, the notification from the simulator sounded. Experience plus 4,200 LV, 13 LV, 14, current experience, 3740500000, current health, 5,079, 6079. Guanshan had never felt the cold voice of the simulator so warm. It almost made him cry. At the moment of leveling up, he immediately recalled the demon knife. It cut off the black fog that wrapped around his body in an arc. The moment he landed, he rolled forward and was already in front of the doctor. The last trace of blood in the black fog was ground dry by him and solidified in the air. The black fog dissipated and turned into a gray human skeleton full of wounds. It cracked and fell to the ground. No, no, no. Don't come over. I can't die here. I still have results, my medicine. My future. The doctor kept retreating, rolling and crawling. The stitched eyes on his face revealed a frightened expression and frantically turned around. Guanshan opened his hand, and the demon knife suddenly turned around and landed in his hand. He took advantage of the momentum and turned around, the blade cutting off the doctor's head. The series of actions was like moving clouds and flowing water. Double kill. P.S. Although I don't know what happened, I feel that if I put a bowl here, I should be able to get a lot of votes. Expectant eyes. Let me take a look. Is there? Closer. Chapter 112. For the silhouette being, tonight was undoubtedly an excessively bizarre nightmare, full of all kinds of unexpected, terrifying surprises. As an old paranormal who had been lurking for nearly 20 years, although the silhouette being had not received any official training, he still had a deep understanding of the classification and judgment of paranormals. After all, he needed to rely on this knowledge to avoid the pursuit of the Taiyan formation. But no battle was like this, completely incomprehensible and unpredictable. The silhouette being couldn't understand Guanshan's ability, just like he couldn't understand why this guy didn't have any energy reaction. When Guanshan pulled out the knife and opened fire in the ward, he thought that the other party was a physique enhancer, or perhaps an immortal's relic. Although the silhouette being didn't underestimate him, he already had a rough idea. Although this person is legendary, physique enhancers have their limitations. After I transform into a shadow, I can attach shadows to others and interfere with their actions, which is precisely targeted at physique enhancers. The chance of winning is very high, so I can take him down. When Guanshan took out the piece of paper and summoned a room full of arm phantoms, he thought that the other party might also be a psychic. The silhouette being understood. After all, Immortal's relic could be acquired, and psychic was an innate talent, so they could coexist. It was very reasonable. This person is really something. No wonder he could kill the 2 top C-class killer bees. It seems that he is relying on the coexistence of these 2 abilities. Although he is strong, as long as he has the help of those experimental subjects, he will definitely be able to take him down. When Guanshan took out a mask out of thin air, the silhouette being thought that the other party might also be a space-type paranormal. It turns out that he is a rare triple ability paranormal. Acquired, innate, and awakened. Indeed, he is blessed by the heavens. But it seems that he is only a storage-type paranormal and has no combat *ability. So what if he is a triple ability paranormal? He will definitely die here today. When Guanshan took off from where he stood, F*CKU. Looking at the figure that was flying in the air, the silhouette being had completely given up the idea of what kind of paranormal Guanshan was. No matter what kind of paranormal he is, as long as he is dead, there's only one name, and that is a dead man. The silhouette being turned into a shadow and swept across the entire hall. From the outside, this cylindrical hall looked like a glass bottle that had been filled with a large amount of black ink. Dark and thick shadows rolled over and over, giving off an extremely oppressive feeling. In a dark environment, he could unleash more of his strength because he no longer needed to transform into a shadow. Instead, he only needed to merge with the shadow. The silhouette being's attacks were as fast as lightning, raining down on Guanshan. He could clearly feel that Guanshan's flying ability had a time limit, and he had to stop and rest every once in a while. The silhouette being calculated the time, seized the opportunity, and concentrated his attacks. Sure enough, he managed to force the silhouette being into a corner. Die! Grinning hideously, he was just about to launch an all-out attack to kill this man when he noticed that Guanshan had suddenly taken out an ancient wooden statue of Xitigarbha and placed it in front of him with his eyes lowered. Then, a faint golden shadow of Xitigarbha enveloped his body. The halo of light behind the bodhisattva's head spread outward, forming a shield, blocking all the attacks outside. The silhouette being happened to know this thing, so his eyes widened in an instant. Xitigarbha statue? A spiritual object from Buddhism. He had seen this Xitigarbha statue in an underground auction before, but he only knew that this thing was divided into 7 parts, each with different effects, and there were naturally restrictions on how to use it. In his wandering life, he had also dealt with some monks, so he knew more about it. Motherfucker, didn't these monks say that we must be proficient in Buddhism and have Buddha nature in our hearts before we can use their things? Why don't they come and see what they mean by having Buddha nature in our hearts? The silhouette being was confused. He wanted to ask on behalf of those nurses who had died without a complete corpse in the corridor, if there was still a good person in this world who killed people like scything flax. Where was the Buddha nature in their hearts? Could it be that in order to put down the butcher's knife, the first step was to pick up the butcher's knife? Before the silhouette being could figure out the logic in his mind, he saw Guanshan holding the Buddha statue in one hand and the demon sword in the other. Guanshan rushed forward and tore open the encirclement with the demon sword. Of course, the silhouette being couldn't just watch the advantage slip away from him, so he immediately turned around and wanted to chase after Chu Yunshin. But then, it was the real nightmare. Guanshan took back the Xitigarbha statue, took out a mirror fragment, and cut a gap from top to bottom with a sharp corner, and then stopped moving. The silhouette being couldn't believe it. Another one? How many spiritual objects does he have? Spiritual items were definitely not something that could be found on the streets. Most of them were priceless and incomparably precious. However, this guy seemed to be endless. However, no matter how Guanshan managed to obtain so many spirit-type items, he had actually stopped all his actions, as if this was a side effect of the item. The silhouette being naturally felt that this was an excellent opportunity, so he accelerated forward. But then he noticed that something was wrong. Am I really moving forward? The silhouette being had such a question. The question quickly turned into a yes. That was because no matter how fast he sped up, even though he was moving, he could never reach the place where Guanshan was located. It was just like trying to win a Toto red envelope. He was always just a little bit away. It was as if he had been isolated from the whole world and was in another parallel universe. The silhouette being realized that he had been tricked, but he was very calm. A space-type spiritual object? It was not surprising. After all, Guanshan had already shown a space-type ability, so it was not that surprising. The silhouette being tried to run forward, backward, left, right, and in all directions, but he still stayed in the same place. He used all his means, but it was useless, so he began to wait. There's always a time limit for a spiritual object. It is nothing more than waiting. I have once hidden in the dark for half a year. Who is afraid of this? The silhouette being thought with a sneer. But he underestimated how difficult it was for a person to be trapped in the same place when there was no concept of time. It was a kind of loneliness and despair that was almost eternal. Therefore, when the effect of mirror fragment was lifted, the silhouette being had actually gone completely crazy. The silhouette being laughed loudly as he rushed out of the white light and came to the normal world. But in fact, at this time, he only had the instinct to attack. He had completely lost his mind. When Xiangwen arrived, he was secretly ecstatic when he saw the fierce attack of the silhouette being. He immediately raised his gun and aimed it at Guanshan. But at this moment, Guanshan took out a bronze bell. Ding-ling-ling. As the strange bell rang, Xiangwen only felt that his head was suddenly hit by a hammer. In an instant, his vision turned black, and many rotten and twisted evil spirits floated out of the bodies of those pieces of meat. The pieces of meat shriveled into the shape of walnuts. Guanshan rang the bell and whistled at the same time. Amidst the strange whistling sound, the evil spirits in the fire knelt down and worshipped him. His sharp blade did not hesitate at all, easily cutting those pieces of flesh into mincemeat and turning those evil spirits into fine powder. Apart from the devil, there was no other word that could describe it. Xiangwen swallowed his saliva. Fear had already appeared in his heart because he noticed that the silhouette being, who was still laughing, had probably gone crazy. However, he still fired several shots at Guanshan. At the same time, the silhouette being laughed wildly and trapped Guanshan. Xiangwen was pleasantly surprised and breathed a sigh of relief, because he had already destroyed half of Guanshan's head. The battle was over. The winner is still me after all. The corners of Xiangwen's mouth curled up. In the next second, he saw Guanshan's face was ferocious. The long blade in his hand fell on the piece of meat, and the experimental subject screamed and died. Immediately, in Guanshan's right eye socket, countless pieces of meat wriggled, intertwined with red and white, and turned into an eyeball again. Then the muscles and skin grew and wrapped around it, reshaping it. The same was true for other parts of the body. Even the clothes were brand new. In Xiangwen's view, this was simply absorbing all the vitality of the experimental subject. Guanshan's face showed a joyful smile from the bottom of his heart, and as if he was saying, "I lied to you," he killed the silhouette being in the blink of an eye, causing his laughter to stop abruptly, and then walked toward Xiangwen. This was the last scene that Xiangwen saw. The ground was full of minced meat and blood, and the powerful paranormal who had gone crazy for no reason had died. The darkness that covered everything faded away, and under the moonlight that passed through the stained glass Madonna, the devil who could summon the evil spirits of hell and devour the lives of others to survive walked towards him with a smile of joy. The blade followed him, and it was as cold as the moonlight. PS1. Thank you to Wang Shurye, 310406, African Black Deer, Imperial Hunter, fu____, Book Friend 20207262153384424, A Wood Sesame Paste, Lone Wolf Howls at the Moon, Forever First Swanee, Book Friend 20210711092548065 for their tips. PS2. I updated a little late, mainly because I ate a CWM melon. It's simply awesome. I really didn't expect that plagiarism would no longer be a Chinese translation, but a Japanese translation. They directly took a Japanese website's doujinshi and translated it into Chinese and put it on the shelves openly. I even copied 2 books. It was an eye-opener. Chapter 1:13. EXP plus 9,000. EXP plus 22222. The final boss has been slain. The simulation is over. The scenario will be destroyed soon. Please leave as soon as possible. Countdown. 0:59. Guanshan picked up the items that had fallen and looked up at the dome of the hall. Dust and stones were already falling from the sky. There were large cracks on the walls and floor. One of the marble pillars around them was completely broken, causing the whole dome to tilt to the side. It looked like it was going to collapse at any moment. Kacha! Kacha! The colored glass below could not withstand the pressure and started to shatter. The huge crack that extended from the wall split the blood-stained statue of the Virgin Mary in half. The battle just now had almost turned the hospital hall into ruins. As the central skeleton of the whole building, if it collapsed, the whole building would not be spared. Guanshan looked around to see if there were any dropped items. He found that the NPC he had saved was crawling out from a small storage room behind the stairs. Clang! The door of the storage room was already broken. With a push from Jiang Xian, it fell to the ground. He trembled as he got up. When he saw Guanshan looking at him, he was startled, but then he swallowed his saliva. When he saw the grotesque corpses all over the ground, he felt his scalp go numb. He said in a trembling voice, all dead." Guanshan shook the blood off his knife and nodded. "Dead. You can run now. This place is going to collapse soon." Jiang Xian had been eavesdropping in the storage room for a long time. Naturally, he knew how big the commotion was. If the building did not collapse, it was really strong. Hearing that, He quickly ran to the glass door at the side of the hall. However, after 2 steps, he saw that Guanshan was walking back. He could not help but ask, "You're not leaving?" At this time, a nurse with a gun ran out from the corridor. Guanshan raised his hand and slit the monster's throat. Looking at the corpse falling to the ground and hearing the EXP notifications, he was in a good mood. "I'm not leaving. I have to kill all these monsters. These are all EXP. I can't waste it." He had not killed enough? Was it not satisfying enough? Jiang Xian's eyes widened as he watched Guanshan's back disappear into the dark corridor. Then he heard a faint whistle. The melody echoed in the corridor, accompanied by the sound of blades piercing flesh and bodies falling to the ground. It seemed incomparably ethereal and strange. Jiang Xian's mind flashed with countless murderous movies. Extreme panic surged into his heart. He shuddered violently and ran away. Thankfully, the glass door of the hospital had been shattered. Jiang Xian stepped through the door and ran all the way to the main building of the Sacred Cur Hospital. Many patients who had escaped from the hospital were gathered around the flower bed and the fountain. A man in his 30s was loudly ordering the security guards to maintain order. From here, they could already see the bright lights outside and the sirens of police cars. Jiang Xian couldn't help but tear up. Freedom. It was freedom. After a whole month, he could finally welcome freedom. Jiang Xian opened his arms and took a deep breath of the fresh air. Only then did he feel the sharp pain all over his body, and his head was dizzy. Jiang Xian's head was spinning. He sat down on the spot and moved over to ask for a bottle of mineral water. The real mental patients were silly. They didn't question him when they saw him covered in blood. They even gave him a few more bottles. A few of them recognized him and came over to ask him what happened. The man who had been loudly ordering was Qin Gu. After he asked for help from the team, he evacuated and rescued the patients. The police who came later were actually the logistics team on standby nearby. Fortunately, there were not many patients in the Sacred Cur Hospital. The doctors were usually not around at night. So far, no one had died. Therefore, when Jiang Xian arrived, he immediately noticed something strange. Although the other patients were also injured, he had never seen Jiang Xian in such a sorry state, as if he had just come back from a battlefield. Qin Gu immediately jumped down from the flower bed and walked to Jiang Xian's side. He squatted down and quickly asked, "Did you come from the lobby of the inpatient building? What's the situation over there?" He was not a fighter, so he couldn't help that person. But just by looking at the outside, he could see the intensity of the battle. His heart was burning with anxiety. Most of the patients who escaped didn't know what happened. They only knew that people died, ghosts, monsters, and nothing else. Jiang Xian heard this question and didn't know how to answer. He hesitated and said, kill all. Kill all." Qin Gu was stunned. He wanted to ask more details, but there was the sound of a building collapsing in the distance. He turned his head and saw dust flying everywhere. Jiang Xian said, "People and ghosts, they were all killed. Game simulation ended. One flew over the asylum. Final boss killed. 1-1. Rating, elite monster killed. 55. Rating, normal monster killed. 3,232. Rating, NPC protected. 5,454. Rating, acquired items. Dr. Syringe, X1. Active potion semi-finished. X1. Gray skeleton X1. Kiss of red lips X4. Shot grenade X1. Extra. Rating, surpass. Extra items available. Acquired reward. Game coins X 27,000. Skill points X2. Unlocked. Achievement. All rewards have been sent to backpack. Please check. Calculation complete. Please wait patiently for the next simulation to start. The thing that surprised Guanshan the most was that there were 54 NPCs that successfully protected him, so they ran away on their own. That counts as my protection? That's convenient. The corner of Guanshan's mouth twitched. He took his personal belongings and jumped out of the inpatient building. He used gravity control to land steadily. Just as his feet touched the ground, the building behind him collapsed. Guanshan turned around to look at the collapsed building. He frowned and was suddenly confused. Where are the other patients? They've been evacuated. He walked around and saw a group of people gathered at the flower bed. He sighed in relief and walked toward them. This time, he had activated the simulation in the hospital. He had made such a big commotion in the corridor and hall that he would definitely wake up the other patients. He wondered what he was doing in their eyes. He still did not know whether the simulation had covered up his actions or not. Guanshan could only comfort himself. Should I say, thank goodness, I'm in a mental hospital? I'm also a patient now, so it's normal for me to look like I'm mentally ill. Thankfully, this hospital is old and there are no surveillance cameras. Although that was what Guanshan said, he still had doubts about the simulation process. Among the rewards this time, how come the active potion seems to have been mentioned by Xiangwen before? Isn't that what he's been researching? Also, the doctor was killed by me. But what about Xiangwen? Did he escape? However, since the inpatient building has collapsed, once the basement is searched, it will definitely be exposed. It will be easy to expose Xiangwen. My mission can be considered completed. Guanshan shook his head and walked near the flower bed. He saw an old acquaintance, Jiang Xian. At that moment, Mr. Jiang was talking to another man. He nodded excitedly and said, "Yes, I saw him." As Jiang Xian said this, he saw Guanshan, who looked completely fine, walking over. His eyes widened, and his words came to an abrupt halt. "What's wrong? Tell me." Qinggu curiously followed his gaze. "You know someone?" Guanshan's sharp eyes saw that the man was wearing a badge. It was the special symbol of the criminal investigation team. In formation, Guanshan gave Qinggu a friendly smile and took out the same badge that Xia Lei had given him. What a coincidence, me too. PS1. Thank you to Starry Sky Eyes, Book Friend 201908062122222679, Book Friend 1503011010001212 for your tips. PS2. It's very necessary to change the perspective of this book. Otherwise, it will cause you to look like Guanshan and have an information gap. For example, in the previous chapter, the origin of the Xitigarbha statue, the appearance of the statue and the mirror fragment in a normal perspective, the specific effect of the mirror fragment, and how Guanshan looks to others. These are all not written in the previous chapter. In a D novel where the protagonist's perspective is blinded, I have to show this information. Otherwise, the plot won't be able to unfold. By the way, knock the bowl. Chapter 114. Is he also a member of the Taiyan formation? Qinggu was stunned. He glanced at the badge and knew it was real. The badges of official members of the Taiyan formation were custom-made. Unique information would appear in the eyes of the paranormals holding the same badge, and it was completely bound to the paranormals. Once the paranormals changed their badges, the information would no longer be effective. This was a kind of rule that came into effect when the paranormals signed the contract with the Taiyan formation. It was set by a special A-class paranormals in the upper echelons of the Taiyan formation, and it was very useful for identifying one's identity. For example, Guanshan's badge indicated that he belonged to the Youhao group, and he was a special non-staff member. "Oh, so you're my colleague. Nice to meet you." Qinggu suddenly understood and showed a friendly expression. He stepped forward and shook hands with Guanshan. "My name is Qinggu." Guanshan also introduced himself. Qinggu had been wondering why no one from the Youhao group had come to such a big event, but another paranormals had suddenly appeared and fought with the two C-class paranormals. It turned out that the paranormals were members of the Taiyan formation. Qinggu had just asked Jiang Xian about the situation in the lobby. He had heard that the two C-class paranormals had been killed, which had made him feel incredulous. When did such a person appear in Hangzhou? Could it be a double cross? Unexpectedly, the real person was now in front of him. Qinggu looked at Guanshan from head to toe, and a new doubt appeared in his mind. This person's body was a little too clean. Jiang Xian, who had been hiding in the corner, was covered in blood. He was almost unrecognizable. Guanshan's hospital gown had no dust at all. It was so new that it looked like it had just come out of the factory. The lobby of the inpatient building had collapsed. The tragic situation of the battle was almost self-evident. However, as one of the main forces of the battle, Guanshan was untainted. Was this reasonable? Unless this person had achieved a completely one-sided and overwhelming advantage, killing the opponent effortlessly. and the so-called intensity was only that the opponent was being oppressed very intensely, but that shadow ability user might be close to C6. To be able to kill him so easily, he should be at least C9, right? Could even be the so-called half-steppy class? Hiss. Then the person in front of him was really a heavyweight. No wonder he was an outsider. It was very difficult to apply for this qualification. Chingu muttered in his heart, and the smile on his face deepened. He curiously asked in a low voice, "Seeing that you're wearing a hospital gown, you must be undercover here to investigate that doctor. Is his name Xiangwen? What exactly was the Taiyan formation in charge of? Why did it feel like they were so familiar with undercover work?" However, it turned out that Xiangwen's matter had already attracted the attention of the authorities. It seemed that the timing of his investigation was just right. He almost missed the headlines. Guanshan shook the recording pen that he had been hiding and said with a subtle expression, "Yes, I originally wanted to investigate in secret, but I didn't expect such an accident to happen. Now, it seems that there's no need for it. We should be able to convict him after searching the basement directly." Chingu nodded in agreement. "I've already reported this matter. That basement will definitely be used as information and evidence. I saw it with my own eyes. The things that Xiangwen did were really tragic. He had been tied up in the basement, and what he had seen and heard was simply a scene from hell. Those deformed pieces of flesh were actually once living people. It was hard to imagine how many more heartless things Xiangwen and that shadow ability user had done in this hospital. More importantly, the profit chain that they had traced back to selling ability user genes was far from just Xiangwen. He was just one of the buyers. Guanshan suddenly exclaimed. He felt that this man's voice sounded a bit familiar. "Are you the one who was caught last night?" Chingu scratched his head awkwardly and laughed dryly. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect that guy to be able to find me. Fortunately, they should all be dead now." His ability was chameleon. He could change his color to be exactly the same as the environment. His ability to hide had always been very good. But this time he was too careless. Chingu had been observing for a few days. He thought that there was only one person, Xiangwen, who knew that there was also a silhouette being. They were all dead? Then it seemed that they didn't escape and were all buried under the hospital building. It was really karma. Guanshan raised his eyebrows, patted him on the shoulder, and comforted him. "At least you didn't become a member of the victim list." The corners of Chingu's mouth twitched. Thinking of the famous victim list, he always felt that he was being despised. "By the way, speaking of the victims, I have investigated a person named Su Rong before. He is not really mentally ill. He knows a lot about what Xiangwen did and the other victims. I don't know if he has escaped." Guanshan looked around and found Su Rong sitting in a wheelchair not far away. He pointed there and said, "That's him, but he is a murderer. Without the protection of mental illness, he should be executed soon." Speaking of which, this was his original purpose. But he didn't expect that Xiangwen would appear again. Chingu nodded and remembered this information. There would be a way to make Su Rong talk later. He patted his head again and looked at Jiang Xian. "Speaking of which, Mr. Jiang is also one of the victims. He should be talking about you just now. You seem to know each other?" "Me?" Guanshan was confused. Why was he talking about him? Wait a minute. Guanshan suddenly remembered that Jiang Xian was next to him at the time. Could he have seen him doing something strange in the simulator? Although it was very social, Guanshan was really curious this time. What was he doing in other people's eyes? Guanshan looked at Jiang Xian with sincere curiosity and said, "Mr. Jiang, what did I do?" He. Jiang Xian laughed dryly and waved his hand with cold sweat on his forehead. "No, nothing. I've said what I wanted to say. You are very good. You are completely fine. After all this time, you were in cahoots? Then why did I say that you went on a killing spree and left no survivors? New grudges and old grudges? How could I live after saying that?" Guanshan was suspicious. "You really didn't? Why do I feel that it was quite a big commotion? Don't be afraid. The criminals are all dead. You can say whatever you want." Was this person threatening him? This was definitely a threat. Jiang Xian insisted and even squeezed out a smile. "No, I didn't. Didn't you do a good job in your investigation? I had some misunderstandings about you before. but now I realize that you're definitely an excellent and rare reporter. I have to thank you for saving me. When we get back, if you have anything you're not satisfied with, feel free to tell me." He patted his chest and gave a thumbs up. "What I said before will definitely count." Guan Shan blinked. He felt that Jiang Xian was a little strange. However, this trip to the mental hospital might have really been tormented by Jiang Xian. He would let himself go and let the world go. That would be great. Gu turned his head at this time and found that his captain, the C7 level physical ability user Wei Hong, had arrived with his men. Wei Hong strode over and looked like he was about to start fight. He asked seriously, "What's the situation? Did he escape? I have already ordered people to seal off the entire area. He won't be able to escape." Gu scratched his head and said, He's already dead, Wei Hong? Question mark. PS1. Thank you to 20200813123516430. Little Tion, Nyo for your tips. PS2 Bowl. Cute. Chapter 115. The confused Wei Hong walked to the side with the other two. After Gu's introduction, he finally understood the situation. "I see. You're the reporter. Hello, I'm Wei Hong. You can call me Fortress." Wei Hong reached out his huge hand and shook Guan Shan's. Although he was smiling, his heart was filled with shock. Although it was a cross-regional mission, the Sacred-Cœur Hospital was close to the edge of Hangzhou. It only took them about 20 minutes to rush here after receiving the news. In 20 minutes, he killed a mutant of the same level as him. And according to Gu's description, it was a mutant that was very difficult to deal with. In other words, this gentle-looking young man in front of him was likely to be able to kill a pure mutant like Wei Hong in a shorter time. Even if all the people present combined, they might not be able to defeat him. Rumor had it that this person had killed 2 top-class Cs in a short time. He really lived up to his reputation. He might even be stronger than that. Wei Hong now understood why Xia Lei was so insistent on taking Guan Shan into the 10 formation even if he had to apply for a non-staff position. The Youhao group was currently short of manpower, and Xia Lei himself was injured and retired. One killer bee was enough to put them in a terrible situation. They needed a strong mutant to handle the situation. Guan Shan looked at Wei Hong. The corners of his mouth twitched. He also felt that it was unbelievable. This man was so burly that even Schwarzenegger could not catch up with him. He was at least 2 meters tall, and the muscles under his sweatshirt were so complex that one could walk through a maze. He could be called a real devil's muscle man. When the two shook hands, Guan Shan's hands were like those of a baby. One could imagine that his fists were the size of real casseroles. One punch could probably smash a person's head. Coupled with this man's dark and scarred face, even if he was smiling kindly, he looked as if he was going to send people away on the spot. Guan Shan said, "No wonder it's called a fortress. From the looks of it, it doesn't look like something a human can resist." "But, that reporter?" Guan Shan asked curiously. "Am I famous in the Taiyan formation?" The other brigade, next door, already knew about it. Wei Hong nodded and praised. "I've heard a little about your previous deeds. To be able to force the killer bee who had been hiding for so many years to this point and even directly shake their foundation, you have contributed greatly." Guan Shan paused, noticing a name he had never heard before. He couldn't help but frown. Killer bee? Wei Hong didn't notice the change in his expression. Instead, he felt that this legendary reporter was actually quite easy to get along with. His easygoing personality suddenly became energetic. He chuckled and said, "Yes, this organization is notorious. They have been hiding in the dark for more than 10 years. Thanks to you, they have lost so many people and even 2 generals. I'm afraid they're very angry right now." Guan Shan only felt a little confused by the praise. All this time, the only criminal organizations he had dealt with were those few young hooligans. But these scattered soldiers couldn't be considered an organization, and they didn't have the ability to hide for more than 10 years. Could it be that there was an even deeper mastermind behind them? Yes, during Qin Deguang's case, Xia Lei had mentioned that someone had induced him to do so. Could it be this killer bee? But what did this have to do with him? After thinking about it, It could be that his investigation at that time had exposed this organization, and the Tan formation had used this opportunity to greatly damage the organization's strength. However, this could only be called a coincidence. Could it really make a captain of the Tan formation praise him from the bottom of his heart? Guanshan felt that something was definitely wrong, so he asked tentatively. Killer Bee must be very angry now and is trying to retaliate against the Tan formation? Of course. Wei Hong nodded with a serious face. The Yohao group and some of our other brigades are now fighting with the Killer Bee. They have already destroyed many strongholds, big and small, especially those that were hidden very deeply. He changed the topic and said, I heard that this clue was provided by you. Minter Xiao applied for this special non-staff member position for you. He really made a lot of money. Huh? Guanshan's face was full of black question marks. Damn it, this was really not right. When did he take the initiative to provide clues? No. This has nothing to do with me. Guanshan quickly clarified. It's just a rumor. I wouldn't dare take this kind of credit. Wei Hong clicked his tongue and patted him on the shoulder. Don't be so modest. Excessive modesty is arrogance. If you weren't a non-staff member, I would have poached you. Guanshan opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but Wei Hong slapped his head and said, Look at me. I almost forgot about the important matter. Let's dig out the bodies of those 2 people first. He turned to Qin Gu and said, Go and count the number of casualties and their identities first. It will be convenient for you to communicate with the people of the Yohao group later. After all, this is their territory. Just take away the information we want. Yes. Qin Gu immediately took people to the ruins to start digging. Wei Hong also ordered people to manage the patients who had escaped. Guanshan looked at them busy inside. He thought to himself, I'll wait until I go back and ask Xiaolei. It's so strange no matter how I think about it. What did I provide the clue? He took out his camera and took a few photos of the collapsed buildings and a group of patients from afar. Wei Hong asked curiously, What are you doing? Guanshan took out his laptop from his bag and sat down by the flower bed. He said, I'm reporting on the news. Don't you already know that I'm a reporter? Wei Hong was speechless. I thought that was your code name, but I didn't expect you to really be a reporter. Speaking of which, is your secret to being a reporter to create news by yourself? You're really good at this. Wei Hong saw that he was taking very appropriate photos, so he waved his hand and went back to work. All right, I won't disturb you anymore. Guanshan also waved his hand and said, If there's anything you need to report, look for me first. Wei Hong said, Of course. It was noisy all around. Guanshan looked at the photos alone and contacted Li Jing. He first released a portion of the information, and the rest still needed official confirmation. Perhaps Su Rong's parents would still pester him endlessly for a while, but since Xiangwen had fallen, his parents' previous excuses would naturally fall apart. It would be impossible for them to do the same thing again. At this point, Guanshan finally completed the 3 missions that President Li gave him. However, he didn't feel happy. Instead, his expression gradually became serious. Guanshan looked at the ruins in the distance. Although most of the corpses had been buried under the ruins, when he got closer, he could still see that some of them weren't crushed to death. The wounds that were too smooth and the body that had been cut in several pieces looked very much like they were cut open by a sharp blade. PS1. Thank you, Guan Xingqian. Great old 1A for your reward. PS2. Rolling on the ground begging for votes. Chapter 116. Who would kill someone with a knife in just 20 minutes? The answer was, it could be anyone. In this hospital, there were a large number of mental patients. Among these patients, there were many aggressive patients. If they wanted to take advantage of the chaos just now to kill someone, it was undoubtedly easy. But obviously, to cause these wounds, not only did they need a motive, but more importantly, a tool. The wounds were so smooth that it was almost abnormal. They had to be really cut in half to break the muscles, meridians, and bones together without any irregularities. There was no doubt that the sharpness of a knife to be able to do this was close to cutting iron like mud. Then, who could have gotten such a high-end knife in a mental hospital that was almost closed and where the patients had to take away their personal belongings? Guanshan could say that among the people in the hospital at that time, only 2 could do it, Xiangwen as well as himself. Xiangwen can do this, but does he have a reason to do so? He has been doing experiments in secret for a few years. Even if it was to satisfy his perverted desire to kill, he could have used the patients under his control to vent. There is no need for him to make a move on the nurses who were easier to find. Guan Shan tried to explain, but what if he suddenly went crazy? For such an abnormal madman, it seems reasonable that he suddenly wanted to become a murderer. That's right. Thinking about it carefully, when the inpatient building collapsed, so many patients ran out. Why didn't Xiangwen, who should have cherished his life the most, come out? Thinking about it, he must have been delayed for some reason, and suddenly going crazy was a reasonable assumption, right? While Guan Shan was deep in thought, Wei Hong came to him and said, "How is it, great reporter? Have you finished writing the news?" Guan Shan closed his notebook and put in his bag. He stood up and said, "It's done for now. The rest will have to wait for the police to confirm." The news about Xiangwen and the collapse of the building had already been published, and Su Rong's incident had already been reported countless times. All that was lacking was a conclusion. As a responsible reporter, he naturally had to wait for the dust to settle. Wei Hong patted him on the shoulder and laughed heartily. "Sai, what's there to wait for? You could just tell Mentor Xia." He thought for a moment, but he seems to be a little busy right now. You can look for the logistics team directly. They will be responsible for the arrangements. Don't worry, as long as it's legal, the Tan formation will take care of it for you. Guan Shan was stunned. My goodness, is the Tan formation so powerful? There was indeed something wrong with his understanding of the Tan formation. He felt as if he had sold himself onto a pirate ship. Cough, cough. A pirate ship doesn't seem to be appropriate. A brothel ship. Hiss, this is even more wrong. Guan Shan shook his head and collected his thoughts. He said, "Let's talk about it next time. Is there anything else?" Wei Hong pointed the inpatient building with his thumb and said, "The bodies of Xiangwen and his accomplice have been dug up. Do you want to go and take a look?" Guan Shan looked at the ruins, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He thought for a moment and said, "I think it shouldn't be difficult to recognize them, right? You should have information about this person, right? I still have something to do." Wei Hong was stunned and said strangely, "We do have information about Xiangwen, but the other person is not in the database. You should have used some means to change his appearance and identity. According to Jiang Xian, you should be the only one who has seen his true face." Guan Shan was speechless. When did he see the true face of the second voice? Why was Jiang Xian so sure? The ominous feeling in Guan Shan's heart grew stronger and stronger. However, if he didn't go, it wouldn't make sense. He finally sighed and said, "All right, I'll go and take a look." When Guan Shan reached the edge of the ruins that had been dug up and cleaned up, he looked at the decapitated body and fell into deep thought. There was no doubt that part of Xiangwen's body had been smashed beyond recognition by the falling dome. However, the way his head had been removed had nothing to do with the building. This was because the wounds on his head were as smooth and neat as the wounds on the nurses' bodies. Well, his explanation was a complete failure. Could Xiangwen have killed himself after killing the others? Even if other people believed him, Guan Shan couldn't convince himself. The reason Xiangwen couldn't escape from the inpatient building was because he was already dead. The person who killed him and the nurse were obviously the same person. So, there's only one answer left. Guan Shan took a deep breath and looked at the sky speechlessly. Looking at the deep night sky, he suddenly felt that his worldview had been refreshed. This stupid simulator has never pulled me into any virtual space. Wei Hong said, "This is Xiangwen's accomplice. Look, what's wrong with you?" He looked at Guan Shan, who suddenly began to think about life, and wondered if this was the strange temper of the so-called strong. Guan Shan took a few deep breaths and then calmly revealed his professional smile. He said, "Nothing. I just suddenly thought of something." Wei Hong vaguely felt a chill on his back. He wondered if the temperature had dropped tonight. He scratched his head and said, "It's fine as long as you're fine." Guan Shan walked over to take a look. The corpse on the ground was covered by a transparent protective cover. It was a very gloomy and sloppy-looking man, about 30 years old. His skin had varying degrees of black spots and blood scabs. He was clearly a patient with anthrax. Although the corpse looked intact, it was actually broken beyond recognition. It was just pieced together. Did I cut that many times? Although it was shocking and very scary, and Guanshan felt a little nauseous, he couldn't help but mutter in a low voice. Wei Hong heard him clearly. You don't even know how many times you cut? No wonder this shadow ability user turned into such a ghastly appearance. Although the body of the so-called body mutation type was mutated, there is still a process of transformation in reality. For example, there was a lizard ability user among the worker bees, but he actually didn't always maintain his lizard form. He could change back to a normal human form, but he couldn't continue to maintain it after death. This shadow ability user was the same. The attack he received when he was in shadow form was reflected in his human form after death, and he became this tragic appearance now. Wei Hong's mouth twitched. He pretended not to hear and said nonchalantly, "Is it him?" Guanshan wasn't sure, because in his eyes, there was only rolling black fog and pustules of various sizes in front of him. Where did the human come from? Even if he killed the boss in the end, he would have turned into a broken skeleton. But to be able to die so decently, and looking at the physical characteristics, he was afraid that only the anthrax patient with whom he had fought for so long could die. Guanshan closed his eyes and let out a long breath. Finally, he nodded. Yes, it's him. So, this was the truth? PS1. Thank you to Dark Knight Sniper, Forever First Killer, and Woola for your tips. PS2. The bowl is here. Where are the tickets? Stare. Chapter 117. Of course, Wei Hong couldn't sense the complicated feelings in Guanshan's heart at the moment. Since they had confirmed that the person was that person, they could now proceed to deal with the corpse. While Wei Hong was looking for people to move the corpse, Guanshan received a call from his personal customer service, Shuman Lin. Guanshan found a broken stool in a corner of the ruins that could still be used. He patted the dust off and sat down. He looked at the arm next to his feet and continued to think about life as he answered the call. Shuman Lin said, Minter Xia has already told me about the situation. It's not convenient for him to go far. You should have dealt with it already, right? Wait for my brother. Captain Lin Wu will go over and take over from the high team. You can leave the rest to us. Dealt with? Now that I think about it, this customer service lady sounds very familiar with me. Could it be that every time I entered a horror game that was simulated by the simulator, I was dealing with some things or some people? If that was the case, then the 10 Formation's attitude towards me is easy to understand. From their point of view, I was dealing a heavy blow to those criminals, so it makes sense that I would be recruited. But since the 10 Formation didn't feel disgusted by my cruel methods, and instead praised me, this department must be special in that the criminals they faced were all so vicious that they had to be killed on the spot. The people that the simulator arranged for me are probably all such people. The more Guanshan thought about it, the more depressed he felt. Although he had felt that something was wrong before, he really didn't expect things to go from being scary to being even scarier. Plus, it was on another level of unknown horror. The biggest question now was, what kind of monsters did he kill in the previous simulations? What kind of situation did he encounter with those strange and terrifying things? Guanshan didn't feel any pain or regret. Every simulation, the monsters came to kill him. If he didn't fight back, he would have died a long time ago. But now that he suddenly knew the truth, he was so shocked that he was a little confused and didn't know what to do. However, in the previous simulations, there were a few traces that could be followed. While Guanshan was deep in thought, Shuman Lin's heart skipped a beat when she didn't hear a reply for a long time. She nervously asked, Can you hear me? Did something happen? Guanshan came back to his senses and said weakly, I can hear you. Go on. Shuman Lin was stunned. She could tell that Guanshan's tone was gloomy, and he didn't seem to be in a good mood. She hurriedly asked, Are you in trouble? Trouble? No, there's no trouble. Guanshan silently added in his heart. He just realized that he might have become a psychopathic murderer in a sense. It was good that there was no trouble. Shuman Lin heaved a sigh of relief. If you need anything, you can tell Captain Lin later. We will definitely cooperate fully. Guanshan supported his chin with one hand and suddenly said, You seem a little afraid of me? Shuman Lin suddenly quivered when she heard this. The meaning of his question was too terrifying. In the TV drama she had seen, if a psychopath asked this question, most of the people who dared to answer that they were afraid would be smiling in the underworld. Schumann Lin quickly denied it. No, it's just that I don't often communicate with people, so I'm a little nervous. Yes, actually, I'm afraid of society. You're afraid of being a telephone operator? Guanshan was speechless. He truly realized that he might already be an unstable person in the eyes of others. Okay. I do have a question to ask. Guanshan asked curiously, is my 200,000 yuan allowance only for special non-staff members? He originally thought that it was hush money, but now that he thought about it, it was actually recruitment money. Yes, the salary of ordinary members of the 10 formation is also very high, but only the captains can get more than 100,000 yuan. Schumann Lin stuttered and told him everything she knew. Guanshan then knew that special non-staff members, although it was written in the contract that they were independent members who were directly under the jurisdiction of the recommender, in the actual process, they actually had power and the appearance of team. In other words, they were independent teams and could act on their own. In this case, if something happened, the recommender would be fully responsible for it, so generally, he would only recommend his true confidants. This was why Wei Hong said that it was very difficult to apply for this qualification and why he couldn't poach people. It seemed that Saleh really thought highly of him. Guanshan thoughtfully hung up the phone and waited for Captain Lin Wu to come over. However, he didn't stay idle and went to find Jiang Xian. He still had one more question that he had to confirm. After the patients were comforted, resuscitated, and examined by some equipment, they changed into clean clothes and were temporarily placed in temporary tents outside the hospital. Ambulances were parked by the roadside one by one. Guanshan even saw some of the patients' family members rushing over. As Jiang Xian was one of the main victims, he was placed in a special tent and looked on coldly, as if he was the only sober person in the world. In addition, he was very haggard because of his mental illness. He was no longer as delicate as he used to be as the deputy chief editor of the newspaper. He had experienced the melancholy of the hypocrisy of the world. Guanshan walked over, and the people in the logistics team automatically made way for him. He patted Jiang Xian's shoulder. Who? Don't you know how to be polite? Jiang Xian angrily turned his head and saw Guanshan's face. He suddenly froze. Guanshan. He smiled. Haha, why are you here? Sit. Guanshan sat down next to Jiang Xian and said, I have one more thing to confirm. Jiang Xian was stunned. What is it? Guanshan said seriously. At that time, the person I rescued from the ward next door and brought all the way to the hall was you, right? Since the monsters he killed during the simulation were criminals and villains, then the NPCs he rescued and encountered should be ordinary people who were affected or people from the Tan formation. He wanted to confirm this with Jiang Xian. Jiang Xian thought that he was going to threaten him again and was scared half to death. He hurriedly said, Yes, it was me. Don't worry. I swear that I will never forget your kindness. What I said before is absolutely true. I won't go back on my words. Guanshan saw that Jiang Xian was so scared and only felt that it was funny. He deliberately asked, So you saw everything? Jiang Xian nodded, then quickly shook his head. No, I didn't see anything. He was scared witless and wanted to cry. I really know that I was wrong. Please let me go. If he had known that this would happen, he wouldn't have looked for trouble and suffered so much for no reason. Guanshan didn't want to make things difficult for Jiang Xian. He shook his head and said, I wasn't the one who sent you to the hospital. You should think about not letting that master go. He came out of the tent and saw a group of people getting out a police car. The leader was a young man with a righteous appearance. That must be Lin Wu. Guanshan didn't go forward. Instead, he was suddenly stunned and fell into deep thought. Bosses were villains, and NPCs were passers-by. These were all people changed by the simulator. This meant that the simulator was changing the real world. But he met an exception. There was one, the only existence that wasn't affected by the simulator. PS1. Thank you to Shattering Rivers and Mountains 222, Book Friend 202108252323528873, Book friend 20210616124013449. Little Fat Rabbit, Geo Lai, Ing Babel, Luo Ling for their tips. PS2. I accidentally overslept. Chapter 118. What was under the influence of a simulator was actually the real world, with real people and things. Then, based on this conclusion, Guanshan's previous assumption that because the simulator is fake, it can't affect reality was not valid. It was the complete opposite. The simulator only simulated the appearance of real people and things. What Guanshan could actually touch must also exist in reality. However, outside the zombie siege alley, the zombie's claws passed through Shun Dinghua's body. It was like passing through a mold and had no effect on her. This was also the important reason why Guanshan had always believed that the simulator was fake. But now, according to Guanshan's conclusion, since the zombies were real, then, in other words, Shun Dinghua, who would not be affected by the zombies, was fake? No, of course Comrade Shun is not fake, but she might not have a physical body. Guanshan thought for a moment and only wanted to find a cigarette to smoke. Damn, isn't that even worse? Guanshan's worldview, which was already on the verge of collapse, received another heavy blow. The sudden appearance of a simulator made him inexplicably join a department that seemed very strange. It was strange enough. Was this the plot of a light novel? My childhood sweetheart is actually a ghost? Guanshan paced around twice and calmed down. I can't let my imagination run wild. When I go back, I'll directly ask Comrade Shun. He firmly believed in his heart. She won't lie to me. Lin Wu got out of the car and saw Guanshan at the entrance of the hospital. When he got closer, he found that the young man's expression was vaguely absent-minded. But he didn't find it strange. There were many strange people with abilities. Wasn't it normal to be in a daze after killing someone? Lin Wu walked forward, stretched out his hand, and said in a sincere tone, "Hello, Xiao Man should have mentioned me on the phone. I'm Lin Wu, the captain of the third team. I want to thank you for saving the lives of the third team and my dereliction of duty." Their third team was responsible for scientific research and some intelligence work. In the end, because of Zhao Hong and his wife's major mistake, the entire third squad was infected by the parasite and almost wiped out. After that, he was directly removed from his position and grounded for a month. It was only now that he took back the position of captain. Therefore, Guanshan was indeed the savior of their entire team. Moreover, Lin Wu had also heard of Guanshan's deeds of killing the killer bees. Even though he was recuperating from his post, he still couldn't help but applaud. In his heart, he admired Guanshan very much. Guanshan looked at the righteous man in front of him and thought, "What the hell? When did I save your entire team? Forget it. It must be another NPC that I saved during one of the simulations." Guanshan was almost numb now. He shook his head and said, "It's fine. It's what I should do." At this moment, Wei Hong also walked over and laughed heartily. He patted Lin Wu's shoulder forcefully and said, "Why are you here? You finally come out of confinement? Where's that little girl?" The bang-bang sounds made Guanshan feel pain in his shoulder. Lin Wu's face twisted in pain for a moment. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Team 1 followed Minter Xia to the front line to deal with the killer bees. They can't leave. I also want to ask, how did you guys end up here?" Wei Hong's face turned serious and said, "It's a long story. We discovered that someone was selling genes here, and this is only a recent development. Before this profit chain had existed for a long time. This matter is not simple. I'll tell you in detail after I report it." Lin Wu nodded. The two of them discussed for a while. The evidence found in the basement would be brought back by Wei Hong, and the bodies would be handled by Yohao Group. Guanshan had been watching from the side. When they finished talking, he asked Lin Wu for help. "Do you have all the information on the criminals you killed before?" Lin Wu was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded and said, "You can use it anyway, no problem. When can I get it to you?" Guanshan said, "As soon as possible." Lin Wu said, "Then I'll ask Xiao Man to give it to you by today." Guanshan thanked him. Lin Wu quickly said, "No need, no need. This is what I should do." He smiled and said, "To be honest, I'm quite happy that you're willing to pay attention to these people. I heard that you've always been a lone wolf and didn't communicate with the Taiyan formation at all. I thought you were the kind of person who only killed people who offended you. That's natural, because I didn't know at all. Guanshan couldn't help but complain. When I dealt with these people, I was probably quite cruel, right? Guanshan thought about what he had done to those bosses before and asked carefully, "Don't you feel scared?" Even he felt that the Taiyan formation was a bit careless to have recruited him. Guanshan couldn't help but have another thought. If the Taiyan formation really felt that he was a dangerous person and decided to take action against him, then the simulator would it also treat him as a boss or monster and create an instance? Guanshan was shocked by his own thought. Could it be that the simulator was activated every time someone wanted to kill him? Lin Wu didn't hesitate and said, "Do you think those criminals killed fewer people than you? Are their methods gentler?" "No, they'll only kill more people and be more cruel. Letting them live is the cruelest way to treat the victims. In comparison, what you've done is good. What's there to be afraid of?" He then said in a self-deprecating manner, "Unlike me, who almost killed so many people. This kind of incompetence is the real cruelty. It seems that I've gained a fanboy." Guanshan had a subtle expression on his face, but his heavy heart unexpectedly relaxed a little. If the simulator's existence was to eliminate scum like Xiangwan, then it seemed to have a positive meaning. The only thing that wasn't beautiful was that this thing was simulating a horror game. Guanshan patted Lin Wu's shoulder and said seriously, "From now on, I hope that you can send someone to follow me and remind me when I take action. Or help me." Once the simulator was activated, he would be completely unrecognizable. Those he had killed before were all bad people, but who knew what would happen in the future? Although he had to kill bosses, there was a chance that he would accidentally kill some NPCs. The Taiyan formation could act as an anchor in this situation. "See?" Lin Wu's shoulder trembled as he endured the pain and said, "But we can't help." "No, we can help." Guanshan felt that this was necessary and said seriously, "I'm not having it easy at all. I'm also very scared. Do you understand? Can you find more people to help me?" "You call that kind of torture that lasted more than 10 minutes not easy?" Lin Wu nodded dumbfoundedly, ununderstood. Guanshan patted his shoulder again and said goodbye to Lin Wu, who was grimacing in pain, and stepped on the road home. After taking a few steps, he saw Jiang Sai's family members getting out of a luxury car. The old man, who was said to be very experienced in the newspaper industry, was worriedly checking Jiang Sai's injuries. Beside him was an old man with white eyebrows and a beard who looked like an immortal. The old man said with certainty, "I said before that he has yang qi on him and that he has to enter the land of extreme negative energy to avoid disaster. You didn't believe me, so I didn't let him enter the ICU. Now it has come true." Jiang Sai cursed. "Bullshit. I'm not sick at all. That Xiangwan has already been caught, and you still dare to come out?" Gonshin didn't panic. Relying on his connections with many influential people, he snorted coldly. "This Xiangwan is a sinner. I just used a little trick to make him walk right into the trap." Guanshan suddenly said, "Then did you calculate that you'll be in jail today?" He snapped his fingers and activated gravity manipulation. Gonshan fell to the ground with a loud thud and screamed in pain. Jiang Sai instantly covered his mouth. When he thought of his broken front teeth, he almost had a PTSD. Guanshan asked the people of the Taiyan formation to quickly take this guy away. He shook his head and said earnestly to the stunned and trembling old man of the Jiang family, "You should be more careful. Isn't it better to buy some health products than to be robbed and killed?" PS1. Thank you to Jiao Yingyin, Shatter Rivers and Mountains 222, Feng Kong, Great Old One X Xiuxiu Z, Forever First Swanee, Lil Yaomeng Lu, Book Friend 20210727032953825 for their tips. PS2. Stick your head out and put a bowl down. Chapter 119. After Guanshan left, the two teams from the Taiyan formation worked together and efficiently cleaned up everything related to superhumans. They narrowed the sealed area to the lobby of the inpatient building. The other buildings, including the fourth building with a basement, were cleared out by the logistics department. At the same time, the director of Sacred Hospital, an old man who had been deceived by Xiangwen for several years and almost had a heart attack when he heard that something had happened in the hospital in the middle of the night, notified the doctors in the hospital to come over and collect the medical records and personal belongings. The old medical records archive room of Sacré-Cœur Hospital happened to be in the inpatient building. When the lobby collapsed, the archive room was among the other rooms that had collapsed. These were medical records from decades ago. They were all made of paper and were extremely fragile. Most of them were destroyed. The old director looked at the shredded paper on the ground, and his face turned pale. He began to draw a cross on his chest. Of course, it was also fortunate that the bodies of the nurses had been disposed of. Otherwise, the old director would have been carried to the emergency room before he had the time to draw a cross. On the other hand, since most of the nurses had died under the ruins, the work of cleaning up the medical records was left to the doctors. Some of the doctors stayed behind to look after the mental patients, while the rest were responsible for saving the medical records. Lu Qiuqiu was one of them. She received a call in the early hours of the morning saying that the hospital had collapsed and Xiangwen's crimes had been exposed. She thought that someone was playing a prank on her, but when the other party confirmed it repeatedly in a serious tone, she realized that things were serious. When Lu Qiuqiu really stood in front of the ruins, she couldn't help but be stunned for a long time. If it was just the inpatient building collapsed due to lack of maintenance, she wouldn't have thought too much about it. She would have just thought that it was an accident. Sacré-Cœur Hospital's building was indeed old. Although it was inspected every year, there was no guarantee that there would be some problems. However, with the addition of Xiangwen's death and the exposure of evidence of his illegal human experiments, she couldn't help but think more about it. Other people might not know, but how could Lu Qiuqiu not know? Coincidentally, there was a reporter who was investigating Xiangwen in this hospital. Was there really such a coincidence in this world? Just a moment ago, Guanshan was investigating Xiangwen and said that he had found some clues. Then, the hospital collapsed, and the evidence was exposed. That guy, in order to expose Xiangwen's crime, he simply destroyed the entire building, right? Lu Qiuqiu was shocked by her own thoughts. She quickly shook her head and denied it. She felt that it was ridiculous. How is that possible? Even if he really wanted to do that, it would be too difficult to execute. Is he going to get up in the middle of the night and break the load-bearing pillars with a hammer? It was impossible for a human to do such a thing. So it must be a coincidence. This guy is really lucky. If he really wanted to investigate and collect evidence, he would have to spend a lot more time. Now that this collapse has saved him a lot of time. As Lu Qiuqiu sorted out these old medical records, she muttered to herself, speaking of which, although this person is a reporter, his acting skills are really good. Even I was fooled. I almost thought that he had cognitive impairment and schizophrenia. His appearance is also not bad. He can be an actor. Lu Qiuqiu thought of how Guanshan tried to deny that he was sick and found it a little funny. He originally wanted to get in through the back door, but in the end, he was directly admitted after the examination. Was it the trouble of having good acting skills? He has it easy. Now that the hospital has collapsed, it's us doctors who suffer. What should we do in the future? Lu Qiuqiu gloomily put away the medical records and thought about where she should go in the future. Most of the old medical records from more than a decade or a few decades ago have been destroyed by such a big impact. It was impossible to collect and sort them out. In fact, the ones that were left were relatively recent. It would be fine if the medical records were left in the file. If they were scattered, they had to be manually sorted out one by one. It was not something that could be done by non-professionals. The workload was huge. Pica, hysteria, obsessive-compulsive disorder, claustrophobia. Lu Qiuqiu was bored to death and began to find joy in the midst of suffering. She muttered to herself as she sorted out the information on each medical record. This depression is suspected. Lu Qiuqiu's voice gradually became softer. Her eyes focused on the top of the medical record in her hand. The name on the medical record was Guanshan. The same name and surname? Lu Qiuqiu was stunned. The corners of her mouth twitched. She thought that this was really comedic. Guanshan tried so hard to sneak into the Sacré-Cœur Hospital, but he did not expect that many years ago, a patient named Guanshan had been admitted to the hospital. Lu Qiuqiu curiously continued to read. This Guanshan, what kind of person is he? How did he get sick? The page in her hand was the hospitalization medical record. It was for a whole half a year. He was admitted about 6 years ago, and this Guanshan was 16 years old. This person should be a high school student, right? If we count it today, his age seems to be about the same. If he was admitted for half a year, he should have dropped out of school. Lu Qiuqiu continued to read. It was written in the medical record that this young man, Guanshan, was mentally agitated due to an accident in his family. He was diagnosed with depression and suspected schizophrenia. He often talked to himself or stayed in a corner without saying a word. However, he did not have any suicidal or self-injuring tendencies. After diagnosis, he was admitted to the hospital. But the strange thing was that this young man came to the hospital on his own without any family members accompanying him. This is rare. If only all mental patients were so obedient. Lu Qiuqiu continued to read and saw that the name of the attending doctor was Lu Mingyi. Lu Qiuqiu's eyes widened. Dad? She never expected that this medical record was written by her own father, and that this Guanshan was also treated by Lu Mingyi. Lu Qiuqiu felt that something was not right. It was not until she rummaged through the ruins and completed the medical record that she realized that the two Guanshan's ID numbers were exactly the same. They were the same person. Guanshan was admitted to Sacré-Cœur Hospital 6 years ago. Lu Qiuqiu was at a loss. But I don't see any records of his previous medical history. Was the information lost? Was it not recorded in the electronic file? But it's obviously his first time at Sacré-Cœur Hospital. When he first came in, he even asked the nurse for directions. Could it be another act? Lu Qiuqiu's mind was a mess of questions. She looked around at her busy colleagues, but no one seemed to notice her. She took a deep breath and took advantage of the chaos to put the medical record into her bag. When Guanshan returned home, it was already evening. Lin Wu said that he had asked Shuman Lin to put the information on his table. Guanshan tidied up his things and went next door. He stood at the door of the villa and looked inside through the wrought iron gate. The house was brightly lit and looked very normal. Along the way, Guanshan did not call Shen Dinghua. Although he told himself that little comrade Shen would not lie to him, the doubts in his heart could not be dispelled. He was subconsciously afraid and nervous. He was afraid that if he called Shen Dinghua, who he could not touch, would disappear. Ding dong. Guanshan took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. But this time, it was not Shen Dinghua who opened the door, but the old housekeeper who had been doing housework. Please come in. After the old housekeeper opened the door, he led the way in very naturally. Guanshan felt that something was wrong, but he could not put his finger on it. When he followed into the house, he saw that not only was Shen Dinghua sitting at the dining table, but there was also a middle-aged man and woman who were looking at him. Of course, they were Shen Dinghua's parents. Guanshan, he came to find his daughter, but what should he do if he bumped into her parents? Waiting online, urgent. Why didn't anyone tell him that Father Shen and Mother Shen were coming back from a business trip today? Guanshan walked past the Shen couple and saw Shen Dinghua sitting at the dining table with an innocent smile on her face. In fact, there was a hint of mockery in her eyes. PS1. Thank you, Jingshi Yu, for the tip. PS2. Votes, Raising Bowl. Chapter 120. Of course, no one told Guanshan about this, because the only person who could tell Guanshan about this was Shen Dinghua, and he hadn't called Shen Dinghua the whole day. Therefore, Guanshan, who was not mentally prepared, bumped into the Shen parents, who had just returned home to enjoy dinner with their daughter. In front of him was a middle-aged couple in their 40s. The man's name was Shen Xian, and he looked gentle and elegant. Although he was wearing home clothes, his every movement carried the aura of a business tycoon. It wasn't to the extent that he was imposing without being angry, but his gaze was enough to make people feel a little uneasy. The woman's name was Ding Pingwei. She maintained herself very well, and her temperament was full of mature charm. Even though she was over 40 years old, her skin was still delicate and smooth. Only a few crow's feet at the corner of her eyes, when she smiled quietly, told the traces of age. Her facial features were very similar to Shen Dinghua's, especially her pair of eyes, which were moist and full of affection, as if they were carved from the same mold. But unlike Shin Dinghua, who always had a smile, Ding Pinghui's expression was more indifferent, and her lips were thin, which made her look more indifferent. She must have been an ice beauty when she was young. At this point, the origin of Shun Dinghua's name was very clear. Her parents' surnames were used separately, and Hui could generally refer to plants, so it was very reasonable to use the word flower as their daughter's name. And Shun Dinghua was a kind of auspicious flower, so it was normal to use in her name. However, at this moment, facing the pressure of Shun Xian and Ding Pinghui's gaze, Guanshan only wondered why these two didn't give little comrade Shun the name Shin Pippi. Even if Guanshan didn't call, Shun Dinghua knew that her parents were back, so she could of course send him a message to remind him not to look for her today. But when he came to her house, there was no news at all from little comrade Shun. Too naughty. She did it on purpose to see how Guanshan would deal with her parents. Guanshan had already read Shin Dinghua's eyes. Shun Xian smiled and waved his hand. Xiaoshan, it's been a long time since we last met. Come and sit. Let's have a meal together. Ding Pinghui added, that's right. Ever since you and Hua Hua went to university, it's rare for you to have time to get together. When you were young, you often came to our house to play. Now that you've grown up, you don't visit us much. Guanshan also showed a polite smile and walked over as if nothing had happened. Thank you, Uncle and Auntie, but there's no need for a meal. I just came back from a scenic spot and have some work matters to confirm with Hua Hua. Normally, this kind of invitation to stay for a meal was just a formality. She had been away on a business trip for almost a month and a half. Now that she had come back to have a meal with her daughter, it was a heartwarming moment. How could it be Guanshan's turn to be a third wheel? This kind of scene would probably only be harmonious when Guanshan really became the son-in-law of the Shin family. Of course, this was just a possibility. It definitely didn't mean that Guanshan had such ambitions. And before that, it was better not to try to challenge the other party's patience. Although Guanshan wasn't afraid. After all, the two families used to be neighbors and used to have contact with each other. The Shin family didn't have any prejudice against ordinary families, and their attitude towards Guanshan was very good. But the gap was always there. Guanshan's understanding of this matter had always been very clear. Before he had enough capital, Shun Dinghua and Ding Pinghui would always only treat him as a good child in their home, and not someone that Shun Dinghua could entrust her life to. Even if Shun Dinghua felt that it was okay, it was still not okay. Shun Xian nodded and looked at Shun Dinghua. In this case, work matters are more important. Let's do what we need to do first. Shun Dinghua nodded obediently, stood up, and walked to Guanshan's side. She said, well, I will work hard. Ding Pinghui smiled and said, I recently heard that Xiaoshan's newspaper reported the truth of many unsolved cases in Hangzhou. It is very famous and has a lot of potential. She looked at Shun Dinghua softly and raised the corner of her mouth. Hua Hua, you have to work hard. Maybe you can get a Pulitzer Prize back. Shun Dinghua puffed up her cheeks and said angrily, Mom, you are laughing at me again. Guanshan nodded and said, thanks to the president's trust, those cases were handed over to me. I have been in charge of them recently, and I'm also in charge of the current official account. Shin Xian's eyes suddenly changed, and he said in a deep voice, these cases are not simple. I heard that Jiang Xian asked someone to investigate them before. Later, something happened to the person, and the matter was put on hold. So, President Li handed it over to you? The big boss was indeed the big boss. This kind of news would be circulated in a certain circle. Only a tool like Guanshan had to investigate it himself. He only asked after he gained Li Jiying's trust. However, he felt that Guanshan was still a little skeptical. After all, Guanshan had only been a reporter for half a year, including his internship. It was a little strange that he was suddenly entrusted with such an important task. Before Guanshan could say anything, Shin Dinghua immediately pulled his arm and said proudly, Xiaoshan is amazing. The things that the detective couldn't solve were immediately solved by Xiaoshan. Moreover, President Li wanted him to be the deputy director of the news department, but Xiaoshan refused. Hey, control yourself. Your parents look like they want to chop off my arm. Guanshan's face was covered in cold sweat. He was nervous and relieved at the same time. He was nervous because the current situation was obviously different from before. It was too intimate, and it had already aroused the vigilance of the couple in front of him. And he was relieved because little Comrade Shin's arm was still warm and soft. It was absolutely real. There were no signs of ghosts or specters. He was a real person that couldn't be any more real. And since Shun Dinghua's parents were here, it meant that there was no problem with Shun Dinghua. There was no doubt that he was just thinking too much. Maybe there was something wrong with the simulator. Guan Shan thought so, but Shin Xian was a little surprised and asked, "Why did you refuse? President Li is going to train you to be her confidant." Guan Shan pulled his arm out and said with a hollow laugh, "I don't think my ability is enough for this kind of administrative position. Besides, I have only been in the newspaper company for half a year. I'm afraid it's difficult to convince the public, so I want to wait for another half a year." Shun Xian said meaningfully, "Half a year is okay, but remember to communicate with President Li more. She will leave Hangzhou daily sooner or later. If you can help her make some achievements, she will definitely take you with her. It doesn't matter if the public is convinced or not." Guan Shan was stunned. He had long heard that Li Jiying's background was not simple. It seemed that the president of a newspaper company was just here to improve her resume. Although Guan Shan did not rely on the newspaper company's income to make money, there was a confidentiality agreement in the Tan formation contract. He could not say anything. Why not have a better job on the surface? Guan Shan naturally put on an expression of listening humbly. Shun Xian then casually said a few words and let Guan Shan and Shun Dinghua go to the study on the second floor to work together. Phew! Guan Shan closed the door and breathed a sigh of relief. Behind him, Shun Dinghua's little hand secretly touched him. She hugged him and sniffed him like a puppy, saying, "Xiao Shan still smells the same. It's really good." Guan Shan sucked in a breath of cold air and immediately turned around, whispering, "Your parents are downstairs." Shun Dinghua blinked and said, "Isn't that better? PS1. Thank you for the gentle and loyal 1,000-year-old chinchilla. Book friend 202106092356548862. Legal and non-existent nickname. Book friend 2021072415465879. Book friend 2021061912535336. A Chung, forever first. PS2. I accidentally fell asleep, but fortunately, I woke up again. I put the bowl out and continued to sleep. Chapter 121. How was that good? Guan Shan reached out and gently pressed Shun Dinghua's shoulder, pushing her back. He shouted in his heart, if this was discovered, then his legs might be broken directly. The Shin family's upbringing was still very strict, but on the other hand, the husband and wife were especially fond of the well-behaved and obedient Shun Dinghua. Under the situation where there were no signs of anything happening, overly intimate actions were obviously not allowed, and it was very likely that Guan Shan would be blamed. Although there was really no substantial, overly intimate actions between the two of them so far, in the eyes of parents, it was inevitable that they would be magnified and have double standards. It was not that it was incomprehensible, but if this was the case, he could only elope with little Comrade Shun. Seemed like a good idea. Guan Shan's thoughts drifted for a moment. Then he came back to his senses and said with a headache, "Why didn't you tell me that Uncle and Annie were back?" Shun Dinghua leaned forward, and Guan Shan subconsciously reached out to catch her. The distance between them became 0 again. The girl leaned her elbow on Guan Shan's chest, holding her cheek and snorting. "You didn't tell me that you were coming back. If you took the initiative to call me, I would definitely tell you. But in the end, I waited for a long time, and you came over without saying a word." If that's not the case, then why? Guan Shan opened his mouth, but he was speechless. Did he have to say that he suspected that she was a ghost? Was it an illusion? Did it not exist? Was he afraid that when he realized this, Shun Dinghua would instantly disappear from his life like in the TV series, and the number he called would become an invalid number? So at the last moment of confirming the truth, he would rather not call Shun Dinghua. At least this way, she could exist in his world for a little longer. Such a ridiculous, pretentious, and embarrassing reason. If he said it out loud, he would definitely be laughed at by little comrade Shin. With that thought in mind, Guanshan gave up on defending himself. He silently reached out and slowly hugged the girl's soft body. He buried his head in Shun Dinghua's shoulder and smelled the familiar fragrance in her hair. He suddenly felt a sense of security that he had never felt before. He said in a low voice, "I was wrong. You can scold me." Anyway, as long as Shun Dinghua existed, that was enough. However, Shun Dinghua did not know if this gentle and strong hug counted as entering the password correctly. The originally angry face of Shun Dinghua softened. She pretended to be mature and touched the hair on the back of Guanshan's head. She said, "In the past, Xiaoshan would talk to me about everything. But now, he often loses contact with me. The last time we talked was a week ago. He didn't even take me with him when he went out. We used to have a tacit understanding, but now, I feel like the distance between me and Xiaoshan has suddenly become very far." Shun Dinghua reached out and held Guanshan's cheeks. Her eyes were serious. She finally revealed her true intentions. "Tell me, do you have other cats outside?" Guanshan blushed with shame and pretended to be stupid. "I only have one cat, little Tanuki. Speaking of which, how is little Tanuki doing in the pet shop? Is she pregnant? If she is, I'll sterilize her after she gives birth. Don't try to change the topic." Shun Dinghua moved closer and stared into his eyes. "Are the doctors and nurses in the hospital good-looking?" Guanshan looked straight ahead. "Anyway, they're not as good-looking as little comrade Shun." Shun Dinghua was alert. "So they are good-looking?" Guanshan was speechless. According to the scene given by the simulator at that time, the ordinary monsters were in the shape of nurses. That was to say, there was a high probability that most of the nurses who helped the tyrant had been cut into pieces by him. Maybe it could be considered as a good-looking death? Seeing that Guanshan didn't speak and his eyes were drifting, Shun Dinghua immediately showed an I knew it expression. Her pair of good-looking eyes were suddenly filled with tears. She lowered her head and felt wronged. "Xiaoshan really doesn't like me anymore." Guanshan hurriedly said, "There is no such thing. Xiaoshan really didn't like me at all. This doesn't exist. No, I mean..." Guanshan took a deep breath. He suddenly felt nervous and his heart beat faster. There is no such thing as not liking you. He vaguely understood what Shun Dinghua wanted him to say at this moment. Shun Dinghua's fingers stroked Guanshan's cheeks. She raised her head and looked at him. There seemed to be stars shining in her watery eyes. She said softly, "That is to say, Xiaoshan likes me, right?" Thump, thump, thump. The study was extremely quiet. There was only the slight whining sound of the computer as the background. Guanshan seemed to be able to hear his own heartbeat. On the way from Sacre-Cœur Hospital, he had already thought about all the possibilities. He also understood how sad and lost he felt when he thought that Shun Dinghua might disappear. Obviously, there was no room for argument. Obviously, the answer was very definite. But it seemed that if he said it out loud, something important would be changed. He had to be cautious, very cautious. Guanshan inexplicably felt that his throat was dry. After a long silence, he slowly said, "Yes." As soon as this word came out, Guanshan subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. But then, he couldn't help but feel that his face was burning. Gradually, he was so embarrassed that he couldn't look directly at Shun Dinghua. This should be a confession, right? They were childhood sweethearts since kindergarten. The faintly discernible distance and estrangement seemed to disappear at this moment. It seemed to mean that their relationship had really changed. But it didn't seem to have changed. Guanshan thought, yes, he liked Shun Dinghua, but Shun Dinghua seemed to only want to be in Guanshan's heart. He looked away. Shun Dinghua's sly eyes got closer and closer. She whispered evilly, "Then prove it." Guanshan was stunned. Then, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "How can I prove it?" Shun Dinghua's eyes were shining. She turned his face to her and said coquettishly, "I don't care. You have to prove to me that Guanshan likes Shun Dinghua." How could he prove that he liked someone? When the person he liked was close at hand, Guanshan couldn't think of a second way. He gradually lowered his head and saw the stars spread out in the ripples. There was a trace of charm hidden in the gentle ripples. There was a moist and tender feeling that he had never experienced before. The girl's eyes were pure and evil. She was evil. There was no doubt about it. Guan Shan thought. She was so evil, so rude, and so cute that people had no choice but to surrender to her will and willingly sink into depravity. Creak! Ding Pingwei suddenly pushed the door open and came in. Eat some fruit. Before she finished her sentence, she saw the two separated like birds startled by the twang of a bough. Shen Dinghua went forward and took the plate of fruit as if nothing had happened. Her face was still a little red. She smiled and said in a soft voice, "Eat." "Thank you, Mom." Guan Shan hurriedly tried to pretend that he was working. But when he put his hand on a mouse, he found that the computer on the table, because no one was paying attention to it, had already awkwardly entered the breathing mode. PS1. "Thank you, Yang Yongjia, Old Mushroom, and Book Friend 202106092356548862 for your tips. PS2 Bowl. Ticket. Chapter 122. Looking at the screen that suddenly lit up in front of him, Guan Shan was so embarrassed that he wanted to break the window and rush out. He wanted to take Shen Mingxi hostage and carry out his elopement plan in advance. Unfortunately, he couldn't. Ding Pingwei looked at the two of them back and forth a few times. When Guan Shan was about to stiffen, she finally showed a faint smile, as if she didn't see anything. She turned to Shen Dinghua and said, "Come down quickly, your dad is still waiting." As she spoke, she glanced at Guan Shan. From this, Guan Shan obviously heard a hint of warning from her words. He twitched the corner of his mouth. What else could he do? Of course, he could only look at the dazzling computer screen and fall into deep thought. Who knew that this computer not only had a breath screen, but also entered the screensaver mode? And the screensaver mode wouldn't be turned on for at least 15 minutes. This meant that the two of them had been in the study for at least 15 minutes without doing anything serious. With such irrefutable evidence, it was useless to find an excuse. Shen Dinghua nodded obediently and pushed Ding Pingwei out of the door. She blinked and said innocently, Yes, it'll be quick. It's just a problem with the layout of the photos. It'll be solved in 5 minutes. Don't worry about it." Ding Pingwei helplessly reached out and knocked Shen Dinghua's forehead with her finger. Shen Dinghua covered her head and dragged her tone. "Mom, I know." Ding Pinghui's expression suddenly changed. She sighed softly and touched Shen Dinghua's head. She laughed and scolded. "Just don't let your dad find out. You only know how to mess around. Be careful that your dad doesn't die of anger." Guan Shan, who was sitting on pins and needles, quietly breathed a sigh of relief. He finally had the courage to click the mouse and turn off the screensaver mode of the computer. Then he casually opened the layout interface of an electronic newspaper to prevent any accidents. Annie Ding still couldn't do anything to Shen Mingxi, but Uncle Shen was not necessarily the same. If this scene was Shinxian, Guan Shan was afraid that he would directly GG. Guan Shan learned a lesson from this incident. He must lock the door next time. Cough, cough. No, who would do this in Shen Dinghua's house next time? They would be traumatized. "I know, Mom. You're the best." Shen Dinghua waved her hand at the door and watched Ding Pingwei leave with a sweet smile. Then she closed the door and locked it naturally. Guan Shan heard the click sound and couldn't help but raise his head in confusion. He looked at Comrade Shen suspiciously and asked, "Why did you lock the door? Aren't we going down in 5 minutes?" Shen Dinghua walked over with a fruit platter. She smiled cutely and said, "But Xiaoshan needs to work." When she smiles like that, she must be thinking of something bad. Guan Shan saw that Shen Dinghua was getting closer and closer. He couldn't help but lean back tactically. "I need to work, but," Shen Dinghua said with a serious face, "Xiaoshan needs to concentrate on work, so he can't eat fruit. But this is my mom's good intention, so you can't waste it." Guan Shan stared at the fruit platter. "No, I think it's okay to eat fruit when you have time." Shen Dinghua picked up a piece of cantaloupe and said with a smile, "So I'll feed Xiaoshan." Guan Shan breathed a sigh of relief. "That's okay." Shen Dinghua put the piece of cantaloupe into her mouth. Guan Shan, "Okay, my ass." Wait. But it was obviously too late for Guan Shan to realize. The demoness, Shen Dinghua, spread her arms and landed on the back of the chair on both sides of Guan Shan's head. She easily trapped Guanshan in the middle of the chair. The demoness smiled and sipped the piece of fruit. She got closer and closer. Her black hair hung down, and her pair of charming eyes were like silk. They were moist and transparent, reflecting Guanshan's slightly nervous face. Guanshan, who had just entered the martial arts world, was weak and powerless to resist. His struggle was futile, and he could only be reduced to a fish in the demoness' mouth. Guanshan looked at the closed door and the light above. The familiar fragrance of the girl was mixed with the smell of fruit and wood. It was cold and sweet, stimulating saliva and quenching thirst. 5 minutes later, Guanshan, who had finished the entire plate of fruit, said goodbye to Shan Dinghua's parents as if nothing had happened, and returned home. Phew! Guanshan sat down on the sofa and lay on his back. He touched his lips subtly and felt that his tongue was a little numb. Of course, it wasn't because he used too much strength, but because two newbies dancing together would always step on each other's feet. It could only be said that they were noobs and playful. The corner of Guanshan's mouth twitched. He felt that he had been bitten at least 7 or 8 times. Sure enough, there wouldn't be a good ending if they did such a difficult action right at the beginning. However, little comrade Shun's painful and aggrieved expression was very cute. It was worth the price of admission. After Guanshan reflected on it for a while, he collected his thoughts and let out a long breath. He pulled out the stack of information that was placed in a sealed document bag under the coffee table. It was the information of the people he had killed. The document bag was made of craft paper. It was light yellow, and there was a thin white seal on it. The relevant information of the document was on it. Tan formation, human world, SP, B67, 20161014, 20161115 observation records, recorded by Xiaolei Shuman Lin, obtained by Guanshan, 20161116. These 3 simple lines of information made Guanshan understand that from the day he had entered the carnivorous restaurant, he had already been observed by the Tayan formation. Or it could be said that at that time, it was actually their operation site, and Guanshan was just an intruder. However, no matter what, Guanshan's doubts would be answered after he opened the document bag. But at this moment, he wasn't ready to do so. Guanshan put the document bag on the coffee table and opened the interface of the simulator first. Because he had been worried about Shun Dinghua all day, and he had been thinking about her on the way back, he had become suspicious and disgusted with the simulator. As a result, he hadn't checked the rewards of the leap over the lunatic asylum dungeon. Now, not only had he confirmed that Shin Dinghua was fine, but he had even confessed to her. Although there was a small mistake in the process, Guanshan was still enlightened. Now, he had the time to open his backpack and see what he had obtained. However, the first thing that caught his eye was the 16 full boxes. Guanshan was depressed again. The number of slots in his backpack really made him anxious. He could only hope that the store would give him more slots the next time he unlocked it. However, most of the items given this time were consumables. He estimated that he would have to use them up in the next simulation. Among them, the item that Guanshan was most interested in was the active potion semi-finished product. Guanshan used his mind, and a transparent glass potion bottle appeared in his hand. It was about 5 centimeters long and was filled with a dark green liquid. At that time, Xiangwen injected Su Rong with this potion, right? PS1. Thank you to Shingu Chio He once upon a time. PS2. Pleading for votes. By the way, Comrade Shin's parents are real. They are not illusions. Chapter 123. Active Potion, Semi-Finished Product. Effect: increase maximum HP by 50% immediately. Self-healing ability is greatly increased. Description: a special genetic potion developed by someone. It is still in the semi-finished stage and has a certain chance of failure. If it is completed, it might achieve the miracle of resurrection. The effect of this potion really shocked Guanshan. The adrenaline shot, which could be said to be a godly tool for beginners, could only temporarily double the maximum HP, which was 100%. Moreover, it could only last for 10 seconds. After the effect ended, there would be a debuff. This potion could directly increase HP by 50% and also increase self-healing ability. It might not be able to beat the adrenaline shot, but it was at least on par with the adrenaline shot. However, the adrenaline shot was opened in the beginner's gift pack. It is understandable that there are more restrictions. Moreover, this potion also has a chance of failure. Speaking of which, this so-called someone should be referring to Xiangwen, right? Guanshan touched his chin. He remembered that in some of the previous props, there were descriptions similar to someone in some organization. Now it seemed that this information was not fabricated by the simulator. It really existed in reality. So there was a hint from the start. Guanshan sighed. He should have guessed that he would be injured in the simulation. He did not know whether to say that he was too slow or that he did not subconsciously think in that direction. After all, the simulator had always boasted that it was all virtual and said don't take it seriously. There were all kinds of open and hidden information differences trying to lead Guanshan astray. It was really a dog. So, Comrade Shun's transmigration incident might have been the simulator's trick. It just wanted me to believe that the scene was actually fictional. Guanshan nodded. He felt that his guess was very reliable this time. The corner of his mouth twitched. Speaking of props, since the props are all real, what did it look like in the eyes of others when I used them? Especially when he used the crowbar to open the door. Fortunately, Comrade Shin was not affected at that time. Otherwise, forget it. The more I think about it, the more I die. It's better not to think about it. Guanshan did not use the potion directly. Instead, he took out another tool. Dr. Syringe. Effect. Extract liquid and cause it to change for the better or the worse. Effect can only be used once on the same target. Description. Schrödinger is an expert. Guanshan was willing to call it Schrödinger's quantum mechanical injector. Before the liquid was extracted to check its state, the probability of the liquid being good or bad was 50%, in a superposition state of good and bad. In order to avoid the failure of the active medicine and waste such a precious tool, Guanshan decided to use a syringe to try and increase the probability of success. Someone might ask, isn't the probability of the syringe half good and half bad? What if he accidentally made the probability even lower? Haha, naive. Guanshan revealed a disdainful sneer. The probability of it being good and bad is indeed half and half, but the effect of this item doesn't stipulate that all the liquid must be extracted at once. As long as I divide it into 1,000 draws, there will be a 500 chance of success. That is to say, the risk of failure will be shared equally among the 1,000 times, and I will definitely be able to obtain a portion of the optimized potions. As for the efficacy of the potion, Guanshan shook the potion bottle in his hand. If he remembered correctly, the syringe in Xiangwen's hand was only 2/3 of the liquid. The potion bottle in his hand obviously had a much larger capacity. As long as his luck wasn't too bad, the difference in efficacy shouldn't be too far, and it might even be better. Injecting directly is a gamble, and using a syringe is also a gamble. Might as well gamble big. Guanshan roughly understood that if this potion failed, it wouldn't be just a failure. The sarcomatous monsters in the hospital with no upper limit of blood should be the product of Xiangwen's failed experiment. Guanshan felt that if he failed, it would probably be dozens of times worse than that. Stability is the most important thing. Guanshan took a few transparent glass cups and began to extract the liquid bit by bit. After dozens of times, according to the suffixes, he knew which direction the active potion would change in. From bad to good, they were poison, reverse effect, failed product, concentration, proliferation, completed product, and essence. The first three directly turned into negative effects. Concentration and proliferation were changes in volume, and the effect was basically unchanged. The last two entries were good entries. The finished product was a 100% success rate, and the essence liquid was an enhanced effect on the basis of this. After Guanshan extracted the entire potion bottle, he obtained 2/3 of the active potion enhancement. The failure rate had been removed from the description, and the potion's effect had increased to 55%. The remaining 1/3 was mixed into the exhaustion potion, which was a highly toxic potion that could instantly take a person's life. Exhaustion potion effect. Immediately reduce the maximum HP by 60%. If the maximum HP is less than 4,000, the user will die immediately. If the maximum HP is more than 4,000, the user's self-healing ability will be greatly reduced. Description: a wicked product of someone's experiment. Please place it high up to prevent the elderly and children from accidentally ingesting it. Wicked. The corner of Guan Shan's mouth twitched. This stupid simulator has learned to mock me? But why do I feel like this is the real reward? When I inject it into the monsters, they will most likely die. Guan Shan was speechless as he looked at the black potion that was bubbling with strange bubbles. He carefully put it aside. Then, he injected the active potion enhancement into his arm. A huge wave of heat spread from his arm to his entire body. Guan Shan could only watch helplessly as the dead skin on his arm rolled up and fell off on its own. The imperfections on his body had almost all disappeared, and the lines of his muscles had become smoother. Guan Shan tried to use the underworld goblin blade to create a wound on his body. No matter how deep the wound was, it would basically heal in the next second. His HP only dropped a little, which made Guan Shan gasp in amazement. Guan Shan hesitated for a moment. If he cut off his arm and immediately put it back, would he be able to recover? But now was not the simulation process. He could feel pain when he was injured. Cutting himself a few times was already cruel enough. If he really wanted to cut off his arm, Guan Shan really didn't dare to do it. Let's wait for the next simulation. When I fight monsters, there will be plenty of opportunities to let the monsters help me test it. Guan Shan put away the potion, syringe, and knife. The remaining 3 items were the gray skeleton, kiss of the red lips, and shock grenade. PS1. Thanks to Bob's little brother number 1, have I seen you, Far Side, La Shinibu Jr., Lini Senpai, Brave VV, Novel Critic, Book Friend 202102614092827 Yenin, Think 696 Think, Great Old Dominator, Anxious 888 Tip. PS2. Please vote, then fall asleep on the spot, ZZZ. Chapter 124. Grayscale Skull was dropped by the anthrax patient. From Guan Shan's perspective, the skull was the actual body of the boss. However, the corpse that Guan Shan saw in the ruins was still relatively intact, except for the fact that it had been chopped beyond recognition. It didn't say that only the skin was left and the bones inside were gone. Therefore, Guan Shan felt that the so-called dropped items should be a combination of concepts created by the simulator based on the characteristics of various monsters. For example, Xiangwen was a doctor, so he dropped Dr. Syringe. Other than that, he had a bottle of vitality potion, semi-finished, which was also used as a reward. From this perspective, he could easily deduce the owner of many of the dropped items that he had obtained before. The anthrax patient, on the other hand, was related to death and shadows. Therefore, he dropped a gray and broken skull. The skull's effect was also closely related to the boss. Grayscale Skull. Effect. After crushing, the anthrax shadow will appear and attack the enemy target. Lasts for 20 seconds. Description. For diseases, death is not the end. So, it means to summon a new boss and attack it for 20 seconds? Guan Shan raised an eyebrow. Thinking about the boss's shocking destructive power and the many dangerous situations that he had been in, he felt that this item was not bad. If used properly, it could create a boss battle and instantly turn the situation around. Of course, it also depended on the strength of the monster. If it was like the monster in the apartment with ridiculously high HP, then there was nothing he could do. As for Kiss of the Red Lips, to be honest, I really don't want to know who dropped this thing. The corner of Guan Shan's mouth twitched. Unfortunately, he was the one who got it from the sarcomas himself. Although he knew that these people were also victims, when he thought about the huge red lips and white teeth under the layers of fat, plus the name Kiss of the Red Lips, he felt a little uncomfortable. Fortunately, this item was not used on him. Kiss of the Red Lips. Effect. After using on a target, the target will be marked. The target's location will be sensed within 300 meters. Effect will expire after 1 hour. Description. Dear sweetheart, don't try to escape my kiss. Blur Guan Shan's expression was ugly. He had experienced so many terrifying and disgusting simulations, but this was the first time he had such a strong urge to vomit. However, ignoring the disgusting description, this was an extremely functional item. This meant that Guan Shan finally had the ability to track them. Although he had obtained an item like the worker bee pendant that could allow him to communicate with the nearby peak-type creatures and obtain some information, the effect of this item was too poor and its limitations were too great. In other words, it was only effective against normal people. It was ineffective against monsters. For example, previously in the hospital, Guan Shan was able to avoid the security guards and nurses and follow them all the way to Su Rong's ward because of the pendant's ability. However, with Kiss of the Red Lips, it was very useful against monsters that had stealth abilities or were fast enough to run away. As for the additional shock grenade, it was simple. This was just an ordinary grenade. When thrown out, it would produce a strong light and a loud noise, temporarily immobilizing enemies within range. The actual attack power of this item was very weak. However, as one of Guan Shan's few means of attacking and controlling groups, this grenade was still very precious. This round of saving the NPC was not a loss. Guan Shan organized his gains, then took a deep breath and opened the document bag. He originally thought that he had made sufficient preparations, but who would have thought that the first document would shock him so much? WTF, Zhao Hong and Fang Minmin. Guan Shan's eyes widened as he looked at the document in his hand. He was in a bad mood. In this first document, the people involved were actually Zhao Hong and his wife, who had found the real culprit because of him some time ago. And the location was the SX snack bar that had already been burned down by the fire. In other words, it was the place where Guan Shan experienced the carnivorous restaurant, Instant's Dungeon. In an instant, he even felt that he had traveled back in time to when Li Jiying had just given him the task. He had also opened the document like this and saw the photos of Zhao Hong and Fang Minmin. The difference was that back then, it was on a computer, but now it was on paper. Guan Shan was practically in a mess in the wind. So, these two people were actually killed by me. I'm the murderer. The murderer is actually myself. Guan Shan calmed down for 5 minutes and accepted this difficult fact. Since the Tan formation did not arrest me, there must be something else behind these two people. They are definitely not as simple as just victims. Moreover, in the scene in the simulator, I was actually the victim. They were the ones who attacked me first. Guan Shan comforted himself and continued reading. Sure enough, although these two people were victims, they were also the perpetrators. Then, Guan Shan could not help but cover his face in hindsight. But if this is the case, what kind of image will I have in the eyes of the Tan formation? Guan Shan found it hard to accept. I've been trying my best to avoid death in society, but in fact, I've already died 7 times in society. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. But things had already come to this point. As the saying goes, when life forces you to beep, and you can't resist, you can only enjoy it. Guan Shan took a deep breath, adjusted his heartbeat, and continued reading. Zhao Hong and Fang Minmin were indeed done inhumane things by those hooligans. But after that, they were given sublimation sugar by the Killer Bee organization that he had heard about in Weihong. The two of them awakened their special abilities and lost their minds. Then, they wantonly started a massacre. Wait. Sublimation sugar. Special ability? Guan Shan took a closer look to make sure that he was not mistaken. The sublimation sugar was a prop that he had obtained from the driver before. It was also the source of his most commonly used gravity control. According to the information, he did not obtain a skill, but awakened a special ability because of the sublimation sugar. Damn! So, the Tan Formation is an organization that deals with special abilities. However, Guan Shan himself had a simulator, so it was not difficult to understand that others had special abilities. Once his train of thought was clear, some of his previous doubts were immediately solved. Guan Shan thought, no wonder Xiaolei brought a few sloppy young people with him that day. They didn't look like police at all. Those people should not be the so-called relatives, but the special ability users under him. So, the monsters I met should be mostly special ability users. That's why they had such strong destructive power. Guanshan continued reading. Sure enough, the information listed in detail the information of every enemy he met. Every single one of them corresponded to the boss's figure. At that time, the one who suddenly turned around on the bus was a member of the Tan formation. Damn, that's even more terrifying. Guanshan thought about how a real person's head was directly cut off just a few meters away from him. He felt a chill on the back of his neck, and his heart was even more scared. What a vicious, criminal organization. Guanshan's hands trembled slightly as he held the documents. He swallowed with difficulty. In other words, the monsters I've faced before and in the future are all King real. They're all here to kill me. Could he go back on his words? He suddenly did not want to know the truth. Let him continue to fight the monsters. PS1. Thanks to Tanuki in the fog, TYT, Ias in the starry sky, Newton on Mars, BB, Book Friend 20210830111190001 for their tips. PS2 Bowl. Looking for votes. Recommendation votes. Expectant gaze. Chapter 125. After knowing that those monsters were real people, Guanshan didn't feel relaxed at all. Instead, he felt that things had become even scarier. Originally, he only had to face virtual monsters. Although they were scary and disgusting, at least he could comfort himself with the fact that they were just fake monsters, so that he could muster up the courage to fight against them. Finally, he felt that he was getting used to it. Maybe one day, he would be able to play horror games calmly. But now, he was suddenly told that these monsters were actually powerful psychics in the real world. And Guanshan had now offended them to the point that they wouldn't stop until he was dead. This wasn't reassuring at all. On the contrary, 1 + 1 was greater than 2. Guanshan rubbed his temples, trying to calm himself down. So, the two monsters on the bus were sent by the killer bees. After I killed them as monsters, there was a second attack in the alley the next day. Then, during the breakthrough mission, I directly teleported to the other party's stronghold to intercept them and killed those worker bees. The swordsman NPC I met at that time was the girl I made fun of for cosplaying, Gao Yi. Guanshan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No wonder Gao Yi's attitude was so strange when she saw him for the second time. He continued to read. Oh, the Han family village was different that time. There were 2 King higher level ones. Guanshan was taken aback. He looked at the information of the 2 drones written in the information and suddenly blushed with shame. So Ali was actually once a human and still has the consciousness of a human? He also sent Ollie to the cat house to breed. Every day, he would whisper in its ear to let it have a few more babies and then take it to be sterilized. It sounded a bit inhumane. This is completely inhumane. Guanshan couldn't help but break down. I'm not such a perverted person. I really thought it was just a stray cat. But it was too late to say anything now. The information that had been recorded had fully explained what kind of person he was in the eyes of the people of the Tan formation. As long as the simulator was still around, it would only get worse. Guanshan decided to go with the flow and continued to flip through the pages. He was pleasantly surprised. Ha! The apartment dungeon is finally not a killer bee. Another great E-sect is here. Damn it. This time, he was targeted by 2 criminal organizations at the same time. Fortunately, the hospital instance dungeon that had just ended had nothing to do with these organizations. It was purely the personal actions of Xiang Wan and another metahuman. However, Guanshan had overheard the conversation between Lin Wu and Wei Hong at the time. He knew that the genes in Xiang Wan's hands were all obtained through illegal channels. It seemed that there was still a chain of interests that had not been verified. However, even though the situation seemed to be getting worse, Guanshan finally understood what had happened in the 7 dungeons. He also had a rough idea of what the Tan formation and superpowered people were like. Some things are still a bit strange. For example, the woman and child in the apartment should be Han Ing and Qin Yao Yao. They are not monsters, but they appeared in the simulator's perspective. And I got the items from their relics. Generally speaking, this kind of special item should be dropped by monsters. Guanshan pondered for a moment and thought of a possibility. After they were sacrificed by Qin de Guang, they did not die. At least, their consciousness still remained. They merged with the apartment together with Qindaguang, but they did not become ghosts. Instead, they tried to remind me. At that time, she pointed up, trying to say that 704 was safe, and those few items could help, right? At this time, he looked at the description of naive children's painting. With clumsy strokes, it depicted a child's naive inner world, but reality did not allow her to have such a world. It should be referring to Qin Yao Yao, who died at the hands of her father when she was only 6 years old. The child who held her mother's hand in the mirror, whose face could not be seen clearly, might not have understood what death was before she said goodbye to this world. Guanshan took a deep breath. He still felt sorry for the death of Han Ying and her mother. At the same time, he hated the culprit who caused this tragedy. Guanshan thought to himself, Gue E sect, this thing is probably more evil than killer bees. Killer bees killed people. Gue E sect killed people. And what was worse was that even the Tin Formation did not know much about it. There were only a few descriptions in the information. Because the headquarters of this thing was F*King overseas, he only knew that they believed in God, and the members were divided into Gay E sect, edification, and nirvana. Among them, edification was responsible for expanding the members, and it was very likely that they were behind Qindaguang's incident. After reading the information, Guanshan could not sleep for the whole night. He felt that there was a bright red danger above his head. No, I can't just sit and wait. I've been targeted. It's useless even if I hide. These killer bees will definitely not give up. It's better to take the initiative to participate in the Tan Formation's operation and get some information. This way, at least when the simulation starts next time, I will know some information. At least I won't have to guess what skills the boss has. He made up his mind. He decided to contact his exclusive customer service tomorrow to learn more about the Tan Formation. Guanshan tossed and turned. But they may also attack people I know. Since it won't affect Comrade Shun during the simulation, will it be safer for me to take her with me at all times? But what if it's just a special case? The Tin Formation seems to have sent people to protect her. Then it's better for me to stay away. But I just confessed. Will Comrade Shun be angry? While he was struggling, he suddenly heard his phone ring. Guanshan's thoughts were interrupted. He got up and looked at the time. It was 2:00 in the morning. The corner of his mouth twitched. Who's calling me at this hour? Is it Sadako or the ring? Although he said that, Guanshan still picked up the phone. What if it was something important at work? However, the caller was not a name he could think of. Dr. Liu? Guanshan was stunned. This was Liu Qiuqiu's phone number that he added when he first entered the hospital. That's strange. Isn't the matter already over? Xiang Wen is dead. Liu Qiuqiu's mission as a free spy for justice should be over. Why is she calling now? Hello, Dr. Liu? Guanshan answered the phone and joked, so there's a rehabilitation consultation program for patients after they leave the hospital? Liu Qiuqiu's voice came from the phone. She sounded like she was about to cry. She said in a trembling voice that, I'm sorry, I have no choice but to call you. My dad is missing. Guanshan was at a loss. No, your dad is missing. Why are you looking for me instead of the police? Are you suspecting that I kidnapped your dad? Liu Qiuqiu choked and said quickly, No, I want to ask you for help. I've already called the police, but I haven't found him after a day. The police can only deal with it as a missing person. Guanshan frowned. You don't think it's a normal disappearance? Liu Qiuqiu said, There was a person who disappeared for no reason before. It was a detective who came to the hospital to investigate before you. In other words, it's your ex, PS1. Thank you for the tip from Have I Seen You. PS2. I fell asleep while writing yesterday. Chapter 126. If it weren't for the fact that Guanshan hadn't drunk any water, he would have spat it out. Dr. Liu, don't make baseless accusations. How could I have an ex? Fortunately, it was late at night and there was no one around. If Little Shun heard this and misunderstood that he had an unknown relationship, he would be skinned alive even if he didn't die. Liu Qiuqiu also realized that her words were ambiguous. She was afraid that Guanshan would get angry and not help. So she quickly whispered, Didn't you take over the detective's job? Then aren't you his successor? Isn't he your ex? Guanshan said seriously, No, I don't know the detective you're talking about. From what I know, he's just the deputy chief editor of our newspaper, Jiang Xian. You should know him. He's the detective's real employer, but he was framed and became mentally ill. He was admitted to your hospital. This detective was hired by him to investigate some news that has hidden secrets. Later, because the detective was gone, the work couldn't continue. I took the blame and was responsible for the follow-up. I was commissioned by the president to investigate purely for the sake of justice. Guanshan said righteously, so strictly speaking, he's just a temporary worker. I'm the official one. You don't have to use the word X anymore. If little Shun heard it, wouldn't be good. Oh, Lu Qiuqiu answered submissively, but she still had some doubts in her heart. The ambiguity of this word couldn't even be considered a misunderstanding. Perhaps only people who weren't single would be worried. Why was this guy so nervous? He didn't look like a scumbag. Was he henpecked? But now wasn't the time for gossip. Lu Qiuqiu quickly continued the topic. I suspect that my dad's disappearance is related to the detectives. Why? Guanshan raised his eyebrows. Just because they're both without reason? Lu Qiuqiu said, no. Although I'm not too sure, my father and the detective have known each other for a long time. He has been asking him to investigate a statue. After he disappeared this time, the statue also disappeared. Thus, I'm guessing that it might be because of this sculpture that attracted some people with malicious intentions. The corners of Guan Shan's mouth twitched. He thought to himself, the scope of this detective business is really broad. Can he really handle investigating so many things at the same time? But in short, with Lu Qiuqiu's explanation, Guanshan gradually learned about the missing detective and Lu Qiuqiu's father. This detective was known as the detective, but he had never revealed his real name. His pseudonym was Bai Yi. There was no way to investigate the history of Bai Qiu's rise to power, but the connections he had today were accumulated through various tasks entrusted to him by others. The more problems he solved, the more connections he had. With his connections, the difficulty of solving problems in the future would become lower and lower, forming a perfect virtuous cycle. For example, in Jiang Xian's request, the reason why he could sneak into the hospital to secretly check the medical records was because of Lu Qiuqiu's father, Lu Mingyi, and Lu Qiuqiu herself. Lu Mingyi was entrusting Bai Yi with the investigation at that time, so he must have agreed to everything. Of course, to be able to do this, Bai Yi's ability was inseparable. If he had messed up from the beginning, this virtuous cycle would not have been able to start. As for Lu Mingyi, he used to be a doctor at Sacred Coeur Hospital. He was a very senior and highly respected doctor who had treated many difficult mental illnesses. Now, he had retired. You're saying that when medicine or technology did not work, the reason why he was able to cure those patients was actually because of the statue. Guanshan felt that the situation had taken a turn and jumped into an unknown territory. Why did it sound wrong to say that the statue could cure diseases? Lu Qiuqiu shook her head and said, I also think it's ridiculous. I think that the structure of the statue can produce hypnotic psychological suggestions, but my father treasures that thing very much and has been keeping it safe. He even asked Bai Yi to investigate it. Bai Yi went missing during the investigation. I originally thought that he must have offended someone because of another request, but now that my father is also missing, it must be because of the statue. Guanshan's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly asked, what does the statue look like? Lu Qiuqiu described, the statue only has the upper body. It's a wooden Buddha statue, very simple, and seems to be from a long time ago. I don't know much about Buddhism, but I heard from my father that it seems to be Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva? Guanshan's pupils contracted, and a strong premonition arose in his heart. He took out his Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva 7 from his backpack, took a picture of the upper body, and sent it to Lu Qiuqiu. Is it this kind? Lu Qiuqiu was speechless. The posture and expression are different, but the material and the image are the same. Guanshan heard the difficulty in her voice, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He said, you don't think that I did it, do you? Lu Qiuqiu quickly said, no. When my father went missing, you were still in the hospital. Moreover, you took the risk to help investigate Xiang Wen's matter. You must be a good person. Although she did suspect Guan Shan for a moment, because she just found out about Guan Shan's medical history, and he happened to be Lu Mingyi's attending physician. But when she thought about it carefully, Lu Mingyi got the statue a year ago, and Guan Shan's medical history was at least 6 years ago. There was no connection. Moreover, it was just an illness, and it was not a big deal. There was no need to kill him. Ding. Good person card, +1. Guan Shan seemed to have heard the sound of the simulator. He coughed twice and said, "If that's the case, things are not as simple as they seem. Give me your address, and I'll bring people over later." Now, it was not difficult for him to understand why another Ksitigarbha statue would appear in reality. Most of the things he had were concept objects created by the simulator according to the characteristics of monsters, but there were also some that he had taken from other people. For example, the Glock 17 that he had obtained from the restaurant. When he thought of this, Guan Shan felt so embarrassed that he wanted to crawl into a hole and hide. He had actually snatched the gun from someone on the spot, and now that person had become his exclusive customer service. Another example was this Ksitigarbha statue. Since it can treat mental illness, this statue should have some kind of enhancement similar to calming the nerves. As for Bai Yi and Lu Mingyi, they should have been kidnapped by superhumans. Guan Shan looked at the sky, speechless. Then, if I go there, will I definitely trigger the simulator? However, the enhancement of Ksitigarbha statue 7th was visible to the naked eye. He believed that the others were not weak either. If he could get a second one, Guan Shan sighed deeply. He felt that he was quite similar to this Ksitigarbha. If he did not go to hell, who would? After he hung up on Lu Qiuqiu, he immediately called his customer service lady. Before he could answer, he heard a strange ringtone coming from the side behind him. Damn, it was really a ring. Guan Shan jumped in fright and turned around abruptly. Shuman Lin poked her head out from behind the sofa and stretched out her hand to greet him. Hi, Guan Shan, PS1. Thank you to the Ordinary Hung, My Sir, and Shui Wu for their tips. PS2. I've been accompanying my mother for surgery for the past few days. I was so sleepy riding at night that I fell asleep again. Sorry.